Chapter 840. After the big cousin left the teaching building, a man who was hiding under a tree and smoking quickly came up. The big cousin said casually, "I've delivered the goods. Let's go back. Don't let the boss wait for too long." Not long after, an ordinary yellow TAC car outside the campus drove out of the university. It didn't take long for the car to drive into a bustling downtown. It stopped in front of an old building. The big cousin was very careful. After he observed the surroundings, he went upstairs with his companion and came to a middle-level house. The one who opened the door was a guy with a full beard. The big cousin threw something to the bearded man. "Antibiotics. I bought it on the way. Give it to Will." The bearded man nodded and looked back. At this time, a man was lying weakly on a shabby sofa. His shoulder was wrapped in a large number of bandages, and the bandages were stained with blood. If the police were here, they would find that this injured man was the criminal who opened fire on the day of the memorial service at the theater and caused chaos and escaped in the end. "Where's the boss?" the big cousin asked again. The bearded man said casually, "The boss and Brother Boston are in the room. You can go in." The big cousin nodded and then quickly walked into the room the bearded man pointed to. When he opened the door, Boston was counting stacks of bills. Seeing the big cousin come in, Boston called for him and took out a roll of bills, USD, and threw it directly to him. "Thank you for your hard work. The boss rewards you." The big cousin smiled and readily took the roll of bills. Then he said to the young man who was reading in front of Boston, "Thank you, Boss Arnold." Arnold, the boss. He lowered his head and held a ballpoint pen in his hand. He was writing formulas on a book, and there was even a thick stack of reference books next to him. "You helped me, so you should get paid." Arnold pushed up the glasses on his face and said indifferently, "And you will get more and more." At this time, Boston shrugged and said, "Boss, I don't understand. Aren't we doing well now? Money comes fast, and we can sleep with any girl we want. Why do you still need to go to school?" "Poston, get out of here after you finish counting the money." Arnold still did not raise his head. "Get someone to keep an eye on that lawyer, Carlo. Caroline gave us so much money. There's no reason for us not to take it." "I like this job." Boston laughed as he picked up a stack of cash and kissed it. "Also, continue to look for Caroline. Don't let her run away," Arnold instructed. Boston casually took a stack of cash and stuffed it into his pocket before pushing the door open and walking out. Big cousin was about to leave as well, but Anua stopped him. "Did anything happen when you delivered the goods?" Arnold asked. The eldest cousin said, "No, it went quite smoothly. It was just that Haley was a little uncooperative. He said he didn't want to continue." "I don't raise trash," Arnold said indifferently. "If he doesn't want to do it, let him go to jail." The eldest cousin said, "I told him the same thing, but he didn't say anything in the end. By the way, boss, are we going to keep helping that mysterious woman sell these bath salts?" Anuor raised his head. "Why not? Since this woman has the ability to integrate so many small gangs in the nearby streets, it's obvious that the power behind her is frighteningly large. And it's not a long-term solution for us to keep doing this on a small scale. If we want to grow, we need more funds. Helping her distribute the goods is a good source of funds." The eldest cousin nodded and said, "It's better for smart people to think about these things. Anyway, I just know that ever since I followed you, I've never been poor." Arnold waved his hand. "Also, outside of the market at the university, tell others to pay attention to not do business with other big shots. But if that's the case, we won't be able to sell a lot of the goods we have on hand." Arnold said, "Then we'll stock up first." Now, every big shot has a lot of goods on hand, and the customers of those big shots are basically fixed. If they want to snatch the goods, they're fighting a price war. These people consume energy, but I can't afford to waste it. Besides, we didn't get much goods in the first place, and it was Boston who paid us in advance. Naturally, we have to sell the goods at the best price." "I see." The eldest cousin nodded. After he went out, Arnold took off his glasses and rubbed his eyebrows, looking a little tired. But he deeply understood one thing, and that was, if you were born without a superior environment, you could only catch up with others through several times more hard work. Arnold only rested for a while before he perked up again. He suddenly opened a drawer and took out a bank card from it. This kind of bank card had a password written on it. He had already checked the number on this card on the ATM machine. Where did you get it from? It's just an ordinary prostitute. Arnold frowned. There must be some secret. Was the show last time in vain? Arnold couldn't help but ponder. Arnold is the real boss? Caroline looked at the disfigured man in front of her in disbelief. Listening to his words that were obviously filled with deep hatred, she said in astonishment, "But Arnold, isn't he a top student? Being a student is just a cover for his identity." The man sat down. "But the real one is that he's the one who instigated the people behind, including Boston." "Impossible. That day, I saw Arnold being hung up by Boston with my own eyes. He was even beaten up." The man said indifferently, "Did you see it with your own eyes? Or did you see Arnold being beaten up by Boston's people with your own eyes? But the injuries on his body at that time, let me ask you, did you see it with your own eyes? How long was he beaten, and where was he beaten?" The man sneered. "Miss, don't you know there's such a thing as makeup in this world? But why'd he put on this show?" Caroline frowned. The man shook his head. "This is also what I'm puzzled about. Arnold probably used this method to deceive you because he wants to get something from you. I know his character too well. He thinks he's smarter than everyone and can play everyone in the palm of his hand. It's always been that way. You don't know yet, do you? These two brothers grew up in the slums. The elder brother is Haley, who has been a fool all his life. The younger brother, Arnold, seems to have taken away his brother's IQ from birth. Over the years, no matter how many bad things Arnold has done, he did it with Haley's identity." The man sneered even more. "In school, he's a student with good character and academic performance. Outside of school, he's Haley, who has accomplished nothing and caused trouble everywhere. Since childhood, Arnold has been forcing Haley to play this game of exchanging identities with him. That's impossible. How could it be?" Caroline felt quite confused. She leaned against the wall. Now in school, is it Haley or Arnold?" "Now, of course, it's Haley." The man said coldly. "Arnold has never let himself do dangerous things. Except for the exams that must be taken in person and some necessary occasions. Arnold is afraid that Haley will be exposed. The rest of the time, Haley has always been pretending to be the student Arnold." Caroline was silent for a long time. Suddenly, she felt funny, since she had been in the identity game of Arnold and his brother. How do you know so clearly?" After laughing at herself, Caroline was more curious about the origin of this disfigured guy. He said that he was living in dorm 403 because of the two brothers. It was obvious that he had a strong hatred for them. Did he want revenge? The man sneered. "Of course I know. Since I survived the accident and recovered from my injury, I have been quietly following these two brothers." Following? Caroline was startled. She suddenly remembered something and said excitedly, "You know how Livia died? Who is the murderer?" The man said indifferently, "Of course it's Haley. Let me tell you, Haley has a very low self-esteem because he has always lived in Arnold's shadow. His character has a violent side hidden in it. Of course, he usually won't break out easily. Because he had spent a long time in conflict, he had developed a special sexual fetish. He likes to torture and kill prostitutes, and Livia is not the first one. It's just that Arnold almost always took care of it in the past." He sat down again. "I don't know why Haley suddenly attacked that night, because I didn't go up, but I think he might have been stimulated by something. After that, Haley made a phone call in a panic. Not long after, Arnold appeared. At this time, they changed their identities again. Arnold should have come to deal with the scene. In the morning, Haley left the school as per Arnold's instructions and returned to the rented place. At this time, they changed their identities again. Arnold wore his own clothes and pretended that he had just returned from school. Caroline said incredulously, "At that time, Haley was still there?" The man nodded. "He was there, but he hid. He didn't leave until he saw you climb the drainage pipe and leave." Caroline suddenly rushed forward and stared at the man angrily. She said angrily, "Since you know all this, why don't you stand up and testify against Haley and Arnold? Didn't you say that your current appearance was caused by the two brothers?" The man said indifferently, "First of all, I have no reason to help you. Then, it's just to prove that Haley is the murderer. That's not what I want." The man's eyes under the bandage were bloodshot. They were the eyes of an avenger. Suddenly, Caroline had a thought. This man wanted to take revenge on Arnold and Arnold in his own way. This gaze made Caroline feel unusually cold. Her heart skipped a beat as she recalled the scene she saw. She didn't know whether it was Arnold or Haley, but in the woods, a mysterious man stabbed him in the chest with a knife. Could it be that the person was this terrifying guy in front of her? Caroline, I need your help. The man suddenly turned off the projector in the screening room. The film slowly stopped, making Caroline feel as if time had suddenly stopped. When I finish what I want to do, I can prove your innocence. I've checked on you. Like Livia, although it's not a glorious profession, at least you can walk on the road openly. The man sneered. Not like now, hiding here and there with the label of a suspect on your head. There are even people from Boston looking for you. Listen, everything that happened to you is caused by these two brothers. I don't know what reason you have to refuse me. Seeing that Caroline didn't respond for a long time, the man frowned. Why? It seems that you don't care if you're harmed, right? Unexpectedly, Caroline suddenly reached out and grabbed the man's arm at this time. She seemed to be very forceful. Caroline stared at the man. What do you want to do? The man looked at Caroline's action in puzzlement. What's your name? Caroline suddenly said, since we're going to cooperate next, you have to let me know how to call you. The man glanced at Caroline suspiciously, then slapped Caroline's hand away and said casually, the old me is dead. You can call me 403. Then what should I do now? Caroline asked. 403 said, do nothing. Go back to dorm 403 first. Caroline frowned. I've already come out. If I go back now, Arnold... No, Haley won't suspect me. 403 said, don't worry about this. He hasn't gone back yet. Now Haley is venting his unhappiness. He called a prostitute. She should be in a nearby hotel now. You can still catch up if you go back now. With that said, 403 gave Caroline something. This is stun baton. Be careful. After 403 finished speaking, he put on a leather mask on his face. I'll contact you. And you, if you find anything, write it on a note and throw it into the garbage bag. By the way, this is the key to dorm 403. Next time when you go out and come back, remember to pay attention to whether there's anything left under the door crack. Caroline cautiously opened the door of room 403. She was slightly relieved to find that Haley wasn't there, just as room 403 had said. She wandered alone in the dormitory, thinking about what happened tonight. If the number 403 appeared when one of the Arnold brothers was killed, did it mean that she was one of the factors that caused this scene to happen? And I saw the scene of my death again. Does it mean that if I help 403, that'll be my end? Caroline nervously bit her fingernails, fidgeting and looking unusually frightened. She suddenly felt that being able to see the future was not something to be happy about, especially when you saw that you were going to die. No, it can be changed. Caroline suddenly opened her eyes. She remembered the scene where she pulled the woman pushing the stroller. Because of her action, the woman and the baby did not die in the car accident. Chapter 841. It seems that as long as we find a goal, we will become positive. Caroline had this feeling. She began to observe room 403, but it was her first time exploring the room carefully. She came to the wardrobe, opened it, and looked at the clothes inside. This should be the wardrobe of room 403. Usually, you can get a slight understanding of a person's personality from their dressing style. Caroline was a little confident in her ability in this regard. This was not knowledge, but experience gained from actual combat. As for what actual combat is, you can guess it yourself. Room 403 should have been a very cheerful and sunny guy. Caroline looked at the clothes here one by one. Suddenly, a photo slid down from one of the clothes. This was a group photo of a man and a woman. The man was handsome, and the woman was beautiful. This was a photo of them hugging. Under the setting sun, it had a little commemorative value. This man is obviously not Arnold and Haley because he has another appearance. This person is room 403. Is this his original appearance? Caroline couldn't help but think of room 403's white bandage wrapped around his face, revealing only 2 bloody streaks and a little scalp and hair. She sat in front of the desk. Unlike Arnold's desk, this desk looked a little messy. Because it hadn't been moved for a long time, the books on the shelf had been covered with light dust. Caroline took out a book and turned to the first page. There was a name written on it. She wrote her name on the book and marked it as a personal item. So this was the name of room 403. Caroline put the photo next to the name on the page. She looked at the man's bright smile in the photo and softly read the name written on the page. Lucas. Lucas. Caroline leaned back in her chair, holding the taser given to her by room 403 in one hand to make herself feel safer. She began to think about her next move. Revenge was a very tempting suggestion. When Arnold returned to the dormitory, it was already past 6 o'clock in the morning. Arnold looked a little tired. Opened the door. The moment he turned on the light, he saw Caroline sitting on the bed with her arms around her knees, looking like she hadn't slept all night. Seeing that Arnold had returned, Caroline hurriedly got out of bed, walked up to him, and grabbed his arm worriedly. She said anxiously, "Where did you go? I thought you had an accident and was considering whether to go out and look for you." I went to the self-study room." Arnold felt the strength of Caroline's grip on his arm and asked in surprise, "You've been waiting for me all night?" Caroline nodded silently. "I didn't dare to go out, but you didn't come back. I was even afraid that Boston's people had come looking for you. That's why I don't even dare to turn on the lights." A pitiful woman could easily move a man's heart. Arnold patted the back of Caroline's hand and said with a smile, "I'm indeed in a bad mood. Because of the recent exams, I plan to revise. Then, I don't know if I would lose track of time. I won't do it again." Caroline nodded and said casually, "No wonder your grades are so good. You really are a bookworm." Arnold smiled embarrassedly. Caroline poured a glass of warm water for Arnold, then yawned and said, "I'm relieved that you're back. By the way, there's food in the microwave. If you're hungry, take it out and eat. I made it casually, but the taste may not be good." Arnold was startled and subconsciously looked at the microwave, wanting to say something. At this time, Caroline had already climbed onto the bed and lay down lazily. She was defenseless and said in a daze, "I can't do it. I'm so sleepy. You do your own thing." Arnold stared blankly at Caroline's back. He stood there with a glass of water in his hand. After a long time, Arnold quietly turned on the microwave. There was a bowl of pasta inside. Because it had been left there for a long time, the pasta had long since turned to mush. He sat down with the bowl and ate quietly. Quietly, silently, bit by bit. Slowly, slowly. In the morning, Mr. Orphy walked downstairs with a heavy head. He didn't have a good night's sleep. Barbara seemed to have been busy in the kitchen early in the morning. When she saw Mr. Orphy come down, she quickly wiped her hands with her apron and walked up with a worried look on her face. "Sir, are you awake?" Mr. Orphy frowned. Looking at Barbara, he said, "He hasn't come out yet." Barbara nodded. "He hasn't stopped since you said to lock Mr. Franch up last night. I was so sleepy that I fell asleep at night. When I woke up in the morning, Mr. Franch was still inside, working alone." Mr. Orphy felt something was wrong. He suddenly rushed out and soon came to the workshop behind the yard. Through the window, he saw Dr. Franch walking around with a football in his hand. On the walls, on the floor, everywhere, there seemed to be more formulas written in chalk than last night. Dr. Franch muttered to the football, but Mr. Orphy couldn't hear what he was saying. He hurriedly unlocked the door and walked in. Dr. Franch didn't seem to notice at all. He muttered some formulas and experimental data that Mr. Orphy couldn't understand. "Enough." Mr. Orphy suddenly felt a little sad. "Enough, it's enough. I'll let someone arrange for you to go back to the Research Institute. Okay?" Dr. Franch didn't seem to hear it, but he seemed to suddenly think of something. He suddenly threw away the football in his hand, then picked up a piece of chalk and bent over the table to write something. "Are you really crazy?" Mr. Orphy muttered to himself. But in the next moment, Mr. Orphy suddenly showed a frightened expression. Dr. Franch suddenly picked up the cup next to him, took a sip of something, and then put it down again. It was just like the action of a person who is obsessed with work casually taking a sip of water. But the thing in the cup was... Mr. Orphy rushed forward in shock, because he found a container under the table, a container of detergent. "Spit it out. Father, spit it out." Mr. Orphy was shocked and hurriedly shook Dr. Franch's body. At this time, he saw that Dr. Franch's face was abnormally pale and his lips were dim. "Don't be noisy." Dr. Franch glared at Mr. Orphy, but before he could finish his sentence, he spat out a lot of white foam and then fell to the ground, his body twitching. Mr. Orphy picked up Dr. Franch and rushed out of the workshop. At this time, Barbara came out with a plate of breakfast. Seeing this situation, she was so scared that she dropped the food on the ground. "Sir, what happened?" "He drank the detergent as water. He should have drunk a lot." Mr. Orphy hurriedly said, "Go and get my car keys." Barbara hurriedly ran upstairs. Mr. Orphy's car rushed out of the house at a very fast speed. Mr. Orphy's hands trembled as he held the steering wheel. His lips trembled slightly. While looking ahead, he frequently looked back at the unconscious Dr. Franch in the passenger seat, breathing heavily. Mr. Orphy suddenly remembered something and dialed the phone in the car. He made a call back to his workplace. "Officer, good morning. I'll give you 5 minutes to get the traffic police to block the road from my house to the hospital. I want a smooth road. This is an order." After Mr. Orphy finished speaking, he hung up the phone. He anxiously looked ahead. "You must be okay. Don't be okay." The security department had a lot of power, so much so that the streets of Rio were suddenly congested in the morning. The traffic lights on several main streets suddenly turned red, but a black private car sped all the way, crazily running through one red light intersection after another. Doctor! Doctor! Someone!" Almost roaring, Mr. Orphy carried Dr. Franch's body and rushed through the hospital door. In front of the hospital hall, Mr. Orphy, who was wearing pajamas and slippers, hugged his father with a pale face and felt the world spinning. "Doctor!" The paramedics rushed out with a mobile bed and hurriedly carried Dr. Franch up. Mr. Orphy followed them all the way to the emergency room. He watched as the lights in the emergency room lit up. Then he slid down the wall and sat down in exhaustion, feeling dejected. Not long after, Barbara hurried to the hospital and quickly found Mr. Orphy sitting on the ground outside the emergency room. She helped Mr. Orphy up. "Sir, it's okay. It'll be okay." Mr. Orphy silently glanced at Barbara. He looked at the corridor light, took a deep breath, and slowly said, "At that time, it was also like this." "Sir?" Mr. Orphy smiled bitterly. "Maggie, my wife. She was inside, but I couldn't do anything. And today, Barbara, do you think I did something wrong?" Barbara didn't know how to comfort him at this time. She could only silently pat Mr. Orphy's shoulder and then said, "Sir, I brought you clothes. Why don't you change first?" I saw a lot of reporters outside. As an important public figure in this country, Mr. Orphy was naturally easy to recognize. In the past, Mr. Orphy would naturally avoid such things, but this time he didn't have such thoughts. He shook his head and said, "There are security guards outside. They won't let them in so easily. Barbara, don't tell Louis about this for now. Let's see how it goes." Barbara nodded. After a long time, the emergency room light dimmed. The doctor took off his mask and walked out. Mr. Orphy hurriedly went up to ask, "It's okay." The doctor smiled and said, "Fortunately, he was sent here in time. We've pumped the patient's stomach. Next, we'll wait for him to wake up. But the patient is old, so pay more attention in the future and don't eat anything by mistake. Fortunately, it's just ordinary detergent this time. If he drank pesticides, it would be troublesome." "Thank you, doctor," Mr. Orphy said gratefully. The doctor shook his head and then said respectfully, "Mr. Orphy, you don't have to thank me. This is what I should do. However, you should change your clothes." Obviously, the doctor also recognized the head of the Ministry of Security who was wearing pajamas and slippers. Mr. Orphy nodded and then took the phone for Barbara. Dr. Frankie was finally safe. Next, he naturally had to settle the large-scale road closures. This was a case of abuse of power, but Mr. Orphy couldn't care so much at this time. He could only minimize the impact as much as possible. "Young master, please have some tea." Gan Hong held a cup of warm water with both hands. After putting it down, she stood aside respectfully. This reminded Luochio of the maidservants in the old era. In fact, Luochio was no stranger to having someone follow him wherever he went, or rather, he had long been used to having someone following him wherever he went. Of course, there was not much comparison between the two. Local news, traffic jam in Rio in the morning. That was a line of text that appeared at the bottom of the TV screen. The screen was mainly about the local news. Of course, for the people present, they didn't care much about it. Okay, then I'll set off. After Song Howard finished the remaining half of the fried dough stick, he took a tissue to wipe his lips and stood up. Luochio withdrew his gaze from the TV and nodded to Song Howard. Have a safe trip. After watching Song Howard leave, Song Tianyu continued. Luochio, I'm going to the temple next. Do you want to come with me? My humble house is very big. It's not strange to have a temple. Seeing that Luochio seemed to be a little curious, fifth uncle explained, Master has the habit of chanting scriptures every day. Luochio shook his head and said, I don't think I'll go. Song Tianyu didn't force him. This was his personal behavior. So he nodded and said, Okay, if you feel bored, let Gan Hong take you around. She'll arrange everything. So there was the scene of Gan Hong holding a cup of warm water and standing on the side. Luochio put down the history of the Ming dynasty in his hand and looked at Gan Hong curiously. Did I ask for it? Gan Hong quickly said, It'll be too late when you want to say it, so it's better for me to send it in advance. Luochio nodded and lowered his head to read the book again. Gan Hong suddenly asked, Master Chiu, aren't you curious? What's there to be curious about? Gan Hong gritted her teeth and said, When we were on the train, Luochio said casually, the Song family isn't simple, so I'm not curious. There's probably a reason for you to appear twice. Sit down, don't keep standing. There's no one here. No. Gan Hong quickly shook her head and said, I'm your woman now. It's very unruly. Luochio was surprised. It seems that the Song family still retains a lot of unnecessary traditional rules. Don't you hate it? Gan Hong slowly said, My life is given by the Song family. I'll do whatever the master wants me to do. Even if he gives you to me? Luochio looked up and asked. Gan Hong nodded seriously and said, But Master Chiu, you didn't refuse, right? Luochio shook his head and said, I just think that if I refuse directly, you'll be embarrassed in front of so many people. Next, I'll make it clear to Master Song and find a reason to cover up this matter. Gan Hong looked at Luochio in a daze. Luochio smiled and said, So many people are looking at you. It must be uncomfortable. Yin PS1. Thank you to the book friend, Master of the Universe. Chapter 842. Song Howard quickly walked all the way to the Dragon Hall, where Oni and Luvia were already waiting for him. Seeing Song Howard come out, Luvia immediately stood up and walked forward, saying, Military advisor, you asked us to investigate the matter of President by Shui Tang. Song Howard waved his hand and interrupted, I told you on the way. Go back to the village with me now. It's my father's order. Oni asked curiously, Why are you in such a hurry? What happened? Song Howard said, Gather the troops, kill, and set fire. Oni was completely restless. Hearing this, he immediately clenched his fists, and his knuckles cracked. I like this. Song Howard said at this time, You drive, Luvia. In the car, report to me about Bai Shuidang. Fifth uncle has already booked a good flight. We can return to the village at 3 in the afternoon. Luvia nodded and immediately went to drive out. When they went out, a red Viper sports car slowly drove through the gate. This was Song Ying's car. Song Howard's car and Song Ying's car met and parked together. Song Ying, who rolled down the window, looked at Song Howard curiously. Uncle, where are you going? Song Howard smiled and said, Nothing, just going back to the village to get something. Back to the village? Song Ying frowned. Her intuition told her that things were not so simple. However, she did not intend to ask too much. Even if she asked, she might not know the answer. The men of the Song family had always been very overbearing. Even if they doted on you, they would definitely not say anything when they did not want you to know something. Besides, strictly speaking, she and Song Howard were separated. She was in charge of the business of the Song family on the surface of the Song dynasty group, so her methods were more or less gentle. Song Howard was on the other side. I'll be back soon. Song Howard seemed to have remembered something. She leaned against the car window and said to Song Ying, Next time you bring a man out late at night, be careful. Watch the time. I won't be around for the next few days, so fifth uncle might not be able to provide a perfect cover for you. Although Song Howren used such a relaxed tone, Song Ying knew that this was his warning. The smiling Song Howren didn't have the dignity of a parent at all in Song Ying's eyes. Instead, she felt a trace of fear to the point that she subconsciously nodded and didn't refute anything. "Oh, that's right," Song Howren suddenly said craftily. "Dad gave Gan Hong to Luochio. Do as you see fit." "What do you mean by I'll do as I see fit?" Song Ying was stunned. She complained to Song Howren, "You make it sound like there's really something between me and him. They had only met for less than 24 hours. What are you all thinking about?" Song Howren continued to tease. "Is that so? From the very beginning, you kidnapped him in the middle of the night and didn't come back all night?" Song Ying stared at Song Howren. Originally, she only wanted to let Luochio see some blood to warn him. Why did Song Howren's words have such a strange meaning? Song Howren rolled up the car window, not giving Song Ying a chance to retaliate. "Oh, that's right. I feel that our family's Luochio would like a well-behaved woman. What does that have to do with me?" Song Howren's car had already driven out. Song Ying hit the steering wheel heavily with one hand and hit the horn. The venomous snake let out a loud cry. Song Howren heard the sound of the horn in the car that had just driven out of the entrance. He couldn't help but reveal a smile. He suddenly looked at Luvia and said with a smile, "My assist was not bad, right? Luvia, as long as you are happy." However, she and Oni had already known the true identity of Luochio. At this time, seeing Song Howren's actions, they couldn't help but be shocked. Could it be that the Song family will soon have a new heir? After being happy, Song Howren's eyes suddenly turned cold. He looked at Luvia and said, "Let's talk about Bai Shuidang." Luvia nodded and gathered her scattered thoughts. "Last night, Oni and I sneaked into Bai Shuitang's office and found something." At the same time, Luvia took out a USB flash drive, then found a laptop and plugged it in. She opened it in front of Song Howren. "It's the reconstruction project of Zhonghua Street," Luvia said slowly. "It seems that Miss Ying is back." Gan Hong looked out of the window, thoughtfully, then looked at Luochio. This Master Chio was very natural and comfortable, but Gan Hong herself felt a little uneasy. In the end, she had only met this Master Chio a total of 2 times, and her first impression of him might not have been very good. Until now, Gan Hong still didn't know why she had fallen asleep in that situation. She hadn't eaten anything before. As people who had been trained in the village, they had a very strict set of methods when it came to eating. And this time, Old Man Song had indeed sent her out to be young Master Chio's bodyguard to a large extent. It wasn't because she was a woman and had a very good appearance, but because she had the outstanding ability to squeeze out the majority of people. In the village's school, her grades were among the best in the first tier. In the last test, she was even given an outstanding evaluation. Of course, just like what Song Howren told her, other than being a bodyguard, if she could do something else, she would be able to do something unexpected. But looking at young Master Chio's intentions, he planned to discuss with Old Man Song about whether he would stay or leave later. Then, before that, she would try her best to make him feel that keeping her was a very worthwhile thing, no matter what kind of personality he had. "Oh, how do you know?" Hearing this, Luochio raised his head and looked at Gan Hong curiously. "Was it the sound of the horn just now?" Gan Hong nodded and said rather calmly, "I once followed Miss Ying and protected her for half a year, so I'm very familiar with the sound of her sports car." Luochio said, "I didn't hear any difference." Of course, it wasn't difficult to have the ability to distinguish between different sounds, but who would be so bored as to go out of their way to get this ability? Gan Hong smiled slightly. Naturally, Master Chio doesn't need to do these things. Luochio took a sip of water non-committally and suddenly said, "You can go and see Song Ying. There's no need to stay here all the time. If you're afraid of being asked, you can say it's my idea." Gan Hong shook her head. "My duty is to follow you and protect you. If there's nothing too special, I won't be too far away from you." Luochio asked in return, "Is my humble home very unsafe?" Gan Hong was stunned and somewhat unprepared. "My humble home has 3 independent defense systems. The manor has more than 30 guards, all of whom are well-armed special forces. Unless it's a heavy blow, no one can sneak in. Although that's the case, if I make an exception this time, there will be more exceptions in the future. It's very likely that I'll let my guard down because of this. As a bodyguard, it'll be fatal. Luochio asked curiously, "You've been learning these all the time?" Ganhong said indifferently, "I can only learn these. In the village, if someone can't show his ability and value, he won't get the chance to be raised. We're all people without a past. It's the village that gives us a new life. But the village has a reward system. If we want to get more, we can only show more." Luochio nodded. "I have a general understanding." Ganhong was stunned. "Master Chiu, you don't know about the village? Can you tell me about it?" Ganhong hesitated for a moment and nodded. Since her father had said that he would give her to Master Chiu, it was a kind of clear indication. Although, the new master didn't seem to be aware of this. However, considering that this was just the beginning, perhaps he hadn't gotten used to it yet. That was why he used such a negotiating tone. Ganhong didn't dislike such a tone. After all, it was much better than ordering her around right from the start. "The village is not far from here." Ganhong's voice softened. "It's about 370 kilometers away. It's transformed from a valley. According to the old people in the village, the construction of this valley is still going on even now." Luochio put down the history of the Ming dynasty in his hand. He liked to listen to other stories of the past. Ganhong was a very good narrator at this time because her expression had unconsciously become less reserved. Ganhong thought for a while and suddenly picked up a glass of water. She wet her fingers and then drew on the table. "It's about this shape. It looks like a flower petal. However, it wasn't like this in the past. It was only after continuous construction and excavation that it finally became like this." Luochio smiled. "It looks a bit like an iris flower." Ganhong's finger moved to a part of the flower petal, saying briskly, "This is where we live. Although it's in the valley, far away from the city. But the facilities here are not bad at all. Most of us live in a two-person dormitory. Some outstanding members can be assigned a single room. This is the rest area. It is specially built for retired members to live in. They can bring their family members to this place." Ganhong's face revealed a look of exultation, and she gradually became more relaxed. "This is the hospital, this is the canteen, this is the entertainment area, this is the school. The children in the village have the right to go to school. It's all free. As for the students, after completing the primary education, they will be divided according to their potential. For example, people like me will undergo strict warrior training. Those without fighting talent can learn a variety of knowledge and work in different departments of the Song Dynasty group. That's right, this is where we usually train." Ganhong pointed to the other corner of the flower petal. "This is mainly the forest area. It is the main place to train our ability to fight in the wild. This is the shooting area, this is the group battle area, and this is the driving area. We need to learn how to drive various vehicles. Are you happy?" Luochio's words abruptly interrupted Ganhong's narration. This made Ganhong unable to react at once. She subconsciously said, "Those days at least let me find the purpose of living." "What about now?" Luochio asked again. Ganhong slowly said, "What I need to do now is to stay by your side and protect your safety." Luochio didn't intend to say anything. He just smiled casually. But at this time, another voice broke in, songing. It was not a good tone. "Oh, it seems that I came back in time. I seem to have heard something good." Song Ying walked in as if there was no one around. She didn't change her clothes. This was what she wore last night. "Missing." Ganhong quickly nodded to Song Ying at this time. Song Ying squinted her eyes and suddenly said, "Are you in a hurry to show your loyalty? Don't you want to see more clearly?" "Ganhong, it seems that the more you live, the more backward you are." Ganhong didn't refute, nor was she angry. Song Ying frowned, but said, "I have something to say to him alone. You go out for a while." Ganhong shook her head this time and said indifferently, "I'm sorry, Miss Ying. I'm Master Chiu's bodyguard now. I can't let Master Chiu out of my sight." Song Ying sneered. "Do you want to watch him take a bath and go to the toilet?" Ganhong said expressionlessly, "If you want. I want to go out first." Song Ying took a deep breath. Ganhong was unmoved. "I've finished the water. Can you get some for me? At this time, Luochio suddenly opened his mouth, picked up his cup, and shook it in front of Gan Hong. Gan Hong hesitated for a while, then took the cup, nodded, and walked out quickly without saying anything. Song Ying watched Gan Hong leave. At this time, Luochio said casually, "Is there anything you want to say to me?" Song Ying walked to Luochio and said coldly, "I don't know why grandfather gave Gan Hong to you, but you'd better not have any ideas about her, and don't have any thoughts of playing with her. Otherwise, I won't let you go." Chi. Before Luochio could finish his words, Song Ying snorted coldly, as though she had specially come to give him a warning. Then, she turned and left. Luochio had to swallow the rest of his words. Luochio shook his head. Not long after, Gan Hong came with a cup of warm water. Seeing that Song Ying had left, Gan Hong didn't say anything. Luochio said, "You and Song Ying are quite good." Gan Hong said indifferently, "When I was protecting Miss Ying was quite good to me. Other than that." Luochio smiled. Gan Hong opened her mouth, only to see Luochio suddenly pointing at his wrist. Gan Hong looked at her wrist subconsciously. Song Ying seems to have something similar on her wrist. Luochio said softly. It was a silver bracelet. Gan Hong shook her head and took off the bracelet on her wrist. She put it on the table and said indifferently, "It's all in the past." Luochio picked up the bracelet and looked at it. Then, he looked at Gan Hong and said, "Since you don't want it anymore, why don't you give it to me?" Gan Hong hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded. Chapter 843. At lunchtime, Song Tianyu sent Uncle Wu over and asked Luochio to go to the living room. Not long after, Song Ying also came over. She had changed her clothes, and her hair was still wet. She had probably just taken a bath. "Grandfather." Song Ying greeted him affectionately and then sat down. She ignored Luochio, who was sitting at the same table as her, and treated him like heir. According to the rules of the Song family, when a master was eating, the servants could only wait on the side. Even an elder like Uncle Wu could only stand quietly behind Song Tianyu. In fact, they would finish eating earlier or be arranged to eat somewhere else. For example, Gan Hong was in the side hall next door with everyone else. Of course, most of them were the security guards of the house. The atmosphere over there was naturally different from here, but the atmosphere here didn't seem to be very good either. Father Song was a shrewd old man. How could he not see that Song Ying was ignoring Luochio? But he didn't intend to expose her. Father Song had been bitterly searching for the whereabouts of his elder brother for decades, so he was very patient. He just smiled and said, "Since everyone is here, let's eat." It wasn't until Song Tianyu spoke that Song Ying picked up the bowl and chopsticks. She picked up a dish and put it in Song Tianyu's bowl. Then, it was her turn, but when Song Ying saw that Luochio didn't move, she glanced at Luochio. It was a very special look with a hint of blame. Luochio picked up a dish from Song Tianyu's bowl. In his memory, he had picked up food for others many years ago. At that time, his father was still alive. Luochio didn't grow up in the Song family, so there aren't so many rules. Song Tianyu smiled slightly. "Just follow your own rules." Luochio nodded and took a bite of the pine nut mandarin fish in front of him. He felt that the taste was quite good, so he asked curiously, "The chef here is called Uncle Wu, right?" Song Tianyu nodded. "He is Uncle Wu's elder brother." "How is it? Is it to your taste?" "The acidity is just right." Luochio nodded. Song Tianyu smiled. Fourth brother's ancestor was once an imperial chef. He even hosted a banquet for Emperor Qianlong, so he does have some family skills. Song Tianyu also picked up a mouthful of pine nut mandarin fish and ate it. He tasted it and said, not bad." He put down his chopsticks and looked at Luochio. Fourth brother has a lot of secret recipes handed down in his family. You will be able to eat them in the future. It's good to have the opportunity to learn. Luochio nodded cheerfully. While they were chatting happily, Song Ying felt as if she had been forgotten. She seemed to be a little unhappy. She did not understand why this guy could open up the atmosphere with just a few casual words. It was clearly just a simple greeting, wasn't it? At this time, Song Ying picked up another dish for Song Tianyu and said, "Grandfather, guess who I found?" Song Tianyu asked curiously, "Who did you find?" Song Ying said seriously, The god of gamblers, Tu Shini. Song Tianyu raised his eyebrows and put down the chopsticks he had just picked up. He said in surprise, "You really found him?" Song Ying nodded and said, "And what I didn't expect was that Tu Shini is here. I heard that he has been living here for many years. He has been living in seclusion in a manor, planting grapes and making wine." Song Tianyu pondered and said, "Tu Shini disappeared 10 years ago. Many gamblers in the world are looking for him. I didn't expect that he was right under our noses. They really don't know Lu Shan. Xiaoying, have you been in contact with Tu Shini?" Song Ying shook her head and said, "No direct contact. I am afraid that a sudden visit will make him unhappy. In addition, our people also found some guys who want to target Tu Shini, but we don't know their origin." Song Tianyu pondered for a while. After the new year, the biennial gambling competition will start again. The time has been set. It will be 3 months later, but the location hasn't been decided yet. Song Ying said in a deep voice, "Last year, our people lost to the Zhong family's Four Seasons casino by a margin of 30 million. Grandpa, this time, I don't want to lose." Zhong family. Old Zhong. Song Tianyu muttered, "Last year, I heard that this old guy was about to die, but he suddenly became energetic again. I thought that there would be internal strife in the Zhong family, but I didn't expect it to be so stable. This old guy is quite lucky. Although his son is not good, his grandchildren are also dragons and phoenixes among men." Song Tianyu said, and suddenly glanced at Luochio, but saw that Luochio was eating calmly. He suddenly asked, "Luochio, are you interested in seeing the legend of the underworld, the god of gamblers?" Luochio put down his chopsticks. Song Tianyu smiled and said, "This is a rare opportunity. Why don't you and Xiaoan go together and invite this god of gamblers? Our group attaches great importance to next year's competition, and we have a reason to win. If I can get Tu Shini to come out of seclusion, it will be a great help to me." Before Luochio could speak, Song Ying frowned and said, "I object." Song Tianyu asked curiously why. Song Ying said in a deep voice, "Grandpa, although he is not an outsider, he just came to the Song family and doesn't know anything. I am afraid that he can't help and will only cause trouble." Song Ying caught the meaning of Song Tianyu's words. Grandpa wanted to let Luochio enter the Song family and take advantage of this opportunity to give the credit. Song Tianyu said, "Just treat it as training, and I believe that with you, there won't be any trouble. This matter is settled. Luochio will stay here for a while. We can't let him do nothing." Song Ying wanted to refute, but Song Tianyu waved his hand and said, "Let's eat. The dishes are getting cold." Song Ying had no choice but to muster up her courage, glaring at Luochio. Luochio blinked. "I haven't agreed yet." Some people were enjoying exquisite delicacies, while others were hurriedly eating boxed lunches on the way. There were even some people who missed lunch due to their busy work. There were also some who were eating special food. How special was it? For example, human organs. The one eating was a strange species because it had 3 ferocious heads. The 2 heads were eating the fresh heart, and the 3rd head was tearing at the bright red liver it was holding with its claws. Charlotte in a black dress walked past this strange dog. The 3-headed monster growled at Charlotte, but it lowered its head after meeting Charlotte's eyes. It was a cold and dissatisfied look. The 3-headed monster didn't want to be taught to be a dog, so it chose to drag the female corpse to a corner and continued to bite. Charlotte snorted and sat down. A few bats flying in the air worked together to deliver a scarlet drink. Charlotte looked at the shadows around. These were Lucifer's employees. But now Lucifer was missing, and the original bar was destroyed after Lucifer's power exploded. Although a new bar had been found to replace it, it hadn't opened yet. She used the excuse that Lucifer was beating a native god as an excuse, but it wasn't a long-term solution. Charlotte planned to use her crystal ball to divine. But at this time, a big man wearing a wrestling mask walked to Charlotte. "Miss Charlotte, Half is missing." Charlotte stopped touching the crystal ball and asked in confusion, "Missing? What happened? Didn't I ask it to look for traces of Bucky?" The big man said, "It's like this. Half came back the day before yesterday, but you were resting at that time, so I didn't dare to disturb you. At that time, It said that it had smelled Bucky and was going to track him. But it has been 2 days, and it hasn't come back. Charlotte frowned and held the crystal ball in her hand, saying slowly, "Link, the secret treasure of pride." This was a door that the big man couldn't see clearly. The so-called secret treasure of pride was actually a place where Lucifer stored many of her servants' soul stones and some secret treasures. Every employee had a soul stone in it. Charlotte frowned and said, "Half's soul stone is broken. It's dead." "What?" The burly man in the headgear was shocked. "Half is a 3-star demon. Who can kill it so easily? Could it be that this is the helper of the native god that Her Majesty is dealing with? Go and look for it first. Even if it's dead, it must have left some traces." Charlotte said calmly. "In any case, let's find where Half was last seen. Take Chi-Chi there." Chi-Chi was the name of the 3-headed monster dog that was squatting in the corner and biting the female corpse. Just as Charlotte felt that there was one more troublesome thing, another uninvited guest appeared outside the door of the new bar. Astonishingly, it was Mozart Wolfgang, who wore 10 rings that glowed with the light of jewels and had a head of flowing golden curly hair. "Oh, beautiful Miss Charlotte, it's nice to see you again." Charlotte looked helplessly at this guy who seemed to be saying, "I'm rich," and said impatiently, "I'm busy now. I don't have time to greet you." Wolfgang showed his white teeth and smiled. "It's okay. I'm just here to play for His Highness Lucifer. Today is already Tuesday, Miss Charlotte. Furthermore, thanks to Her Highness Lucifer's display of her great power last week, I was inspired by the storm. I've composed a new song of doomsday. I really want Her Highness to listen to it." "I almost forgot about this." Charlotte rubbed her forehead and could only say, "Then you came at the wrong time. Lucifer isn't here right now." Wolfgang was startled, then closed his eyes and said doubtfully, "It's true. The notes in the wind tell me that His Highness is indeed not here and not nearby." Charlotte was startled and hurriedly said, "You can sense it?" Wolfgang also hurriedly said, "Miss Charlotte, don't misunderstand. This humble one has never dared to disturb His Highness Lucifer. Even if I found this place, it was only because of the demon aura here." Charlotte's heart skipped a beat, and she gave Wolfgang a special look. Soon, the two came to a quiet place. Charlotte said, "Already know about Lucifer's outburst of power last week, right?" Wolfgang nodded and said, "Only His Highness Lucifer can dare to release tremendous power on such a large scale in the main world. It really makes me envious. By the way, why did His Highness do this?" Her employees didn't need to know what happened that day, but Wolfgang's situation was different. Perhaps she could use this guy's ability to find where Lucifer was now. Moreover, Charlotte believed that the other party would not refuse. After all, Wolfgang needed to play enough songs for Lucifer to fulfill the agreement between the two sides. Thus, Charlotte picked out some of the important things from that day and explained them. After hearing this, Wolfgang furrowed his brows, his expression solemn. The silver chains that came from a void even made His Highness anxious? Charlotte said, If it weren't for the main world, Lucifer would still have some scruples." Wolfgang nodded in agreement. "Indeed, with His Highness's ability, if he really broke out, I'm afraid it could have become a real doomsday, and not just that. However, the power behind this silver chain also made His Highness suffer a little. This is also an indisputable fact." Silver chain. "Do you know something?" Charlotte asked quickly. Wolfgang shook his head. "As far as I know, there are indeed people who habitually use chains as weapons. But in fact, I'm afraid they don't have the power to do this. The key is that after that battle, there was no news of His Highness, which is even more thought-provoking. Lucifer's life is definitely not in danger," Charlotte said with certainty. "Otherwise, we would all know. He is likely to have entered a lost area. If that's the case, then it's more troublesome." Wolfgang said, "Crossing different boundaries and looking for people in different secondary planes is not my strong point. Even you transcending level experts can't do anything." Charlotte frowned. Wolfgang smiled slightly and said, "It's just that our fields are not the same. How about this? Wait for me to go back to the crack between dimensions and ask a friend for help. No one is better at traveling through space than that person. Then I'll wait for your news. Charlotte nodded. Wolfgang then took out a strange plate and retreated into a torn crack in front of Charlotte. Bucky picked up a piece of fried golden meat with a fork and stuffed it into his mouth. He chewed it with relish. My servant is really capable. He found me 3 new people in such a short time. Buggy forcefully swallowed the piece of fried meat, which made his taste buds explode. Licking his lips, he said, Miss Yi, it seems that it won't take long for my God's kingdom to appear in real life. This was Mr. Besson's mansion. As a fanatical believer, Mr. Besson even gave up his room for the oracle to use, and he moved to the guest room with his wife. Mr. Besson's wife was quite dissatisfied with this, but after receiving the blessing of the oracle and feeling the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes magically disappear, she had no objection at all. That night, after Mr. Besson fell asleep, she sneaked into the bed of the oracle. Bucky gladly accepted it and spent a few hours in sowing glory on Madame Besson, and then promised that this sacred act would continue in the future. This is a good thing. Yi glanced at Bucky indifferently. When a number of people reaches 100, I will help you create another miracle to consolidate their trust in you. When you have 100 fanatical believers, the foundation is laid. What else could Bucky say? Of course, he continued to lick the plate. Speaking of which, Miss Maid had prepared this kind of meat for him in the past 2 days. It was really amazing. He felt that his mental power cultivation in the past 2 days was particularly fast. Chapter 844. The 3-headed dog was sniffing the ground as it slowly moved forward. There was a huge ring on its body, and the ring was connected to a chain. The end of the chain was in the hands of a particularly muscular wrestler in a headgear. The 3-headed dog was naturally Chi-Chi, who was sent by Charlotte to search for the missing 3-star demon, Half. At this time, Chi-Chi suddenly stopped, and the hooded man looked around in confusion. This was a middle-class residential area nearby. They were now outside the fence of a 2-story house's back garden. This is the place where Half disappeared. The hooded man looked at the ordinary-looking house in front of him with a strange expression and then walked in. However, the hooded man didn't find anything special even after walking around in a circle. Apart from the fact that the owner of the house had a set of expensive suits stolen a few days ago and was now installing a surveillance system, nothing special happened. However, Chi-Chi had a strong urge for fresh flesh and blood, so the hooded man had no choice but to drag Chi-Chi out. However, at this moment, in front of the hooded man, a woman was walking towards him. Black boots, a dark blue retro-style jacket with a zipper, and a big round brown sunglasses on her face. Her face couldn't be seen clearly, but her exposed body could be described as perfect. This is quite a fresh blood meal, the hooded man muttered in his heart. But now wasn't the time to let Chi-Chi eat. He still had the task that Charlotte gave him. Let's go, Chi-Chi. The wrestler pulled the 3-headed dog hard. They were cast with invisibility magic, and if the demon didn't want to, ordinary people wouldn't be able to see them. The wrestler held Chi-Chi's hand and walked past the woman. The woman's gaze didn't seem to fall on them. Just as they were about to walk past each other, the sound of the heels of the boots hitting the floor suddenly stopped. Is this the descendant of Cerberus? The woman's voice was heard. The man in the headgear was startled. This woman could see him and Chi-Chi. The hooded man abruptly turned around, only to see that the woman was sizing up Chi-Chi. I ran out of the materials last time, the woman said softly. Then, she looked at the hooded man. Her bright red lips curved slightly. Actually, I didn't hide it on purpose. That 3-star demon. Who are you? The wrestler felt a strong sense of danger. The woman slowly waved her hand, and a black light flashed in the wind. The wrestler and Chi-Chi stopped moving at the same time, because their bodies were split into 2 halves. But even so, there wasn't a lot of blood sputtering out. The wounds on their bodies were abnormally smooth, and the wounds had been charred black, sealing their blood. The woman smiled and took off the big round brown sunglasses, revealing a pair of dark blue eyes. Miss Maid of the club. Yi looked at the 4 pieces of corpses on the ground. Biting the end of the sunglasses frame, She narrowed her eyes with satisfaction. It's enough for several days. It was impossible for such filthy flesh to enter the kitchen of Miss Maid, who was obsessed with cleanliness. So they were processed in a star-rated restaurant in this city. Although it was fine as long as the food was cooked, it was not for the master anyway. The reason why this star-rated restaurant was chosen was naturally because of Miss Maid's personal whim. A normal kitchen was too messy and dirty. The strange pieces of meat were placed on the clean kitchen counter. The chef stood motionless beside them. Even though these pieces of meat looked like the heart of some kind of creature and were still beating, and the blood that flowed out was a strange dark green, he was still unmoved. As usual, I'll come and get it when I'm done. Well, let's make stew today. After hearing such a sound, the chef silently picked up the basin filled with meat, turned around, and walked into the processing room. Then, he picked up the kitchen knife with blank eyes and began to cut the meat. After instructing the chef, Miss Maid left the restaurant from the back door. She walked alone on the streets of Rio, and when she passed by a fashion store, she would specially go in to choose and try on clothes, but she didn't buy anything. She would sit quietly in the small shop recommended by the gourmet magazine, and then look at the pedestrians outside the window. No one would come and talk to her, because she didn't allow any stranger to sit beside her. She felt that she hadn't been so leisurely and quietly enjoyed her time alone for a long time. In the past, there was a time when she was keen to wander around in her free time. During that time, the club hadn't changed its boss yet, and the former boss kept changing the address. But gradually, she lost interest in doing these things. Gradually, she spent more time quietly sitting in the dimly lit hall, waiting for different guests to arrive one by one. Everything was silent. Everything was silent. Everything was silent. Miss, what do you want to order? The waiter came over with a professional smile. Is there anything to recommend? She smiled. I read the magazine's introduction. This restaurant is very good. The waiter immediately said, then you can try our cocktail here. Our boss spent more than half a year to make it for his wife's 40th birthday. It has a good reputation. Then please give me a drink. Everything began to make noise. Caroline didn't wake up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. This was actually her usual schedule for Caroline. So instead of feeling unusually tired, she had an illusion that she had returned to her usual routine. She just turned her gaze, and when she saw Arnold leaning against the window and looking out, she recovered from the illusion. It was such a bad day. However, she couldn't let this Arnold realize that she already knew something. So Caroline scratched her messy hair, yawned, and said slowly, didn't you go to class? Arnold shook his head at this time and suddenly said, the weather outside is quite good. Do you want to go out for a walk? Caroline glanced at Arnold doubtfully, hesitating. Go out? Didn't you say that it's dangerous outside? Arnold said, I can't let you stay here all the time. He walked to Caroline, smiled, and said, it's been several days, and they haven't come looking for me. I think it's safe for now. Let's go. I'll take you to a good place. Caroline hesitated for a moment, then nodded, then let me take a shower before going out. Arnold, on the other hand, readily agreed. After walking into the bathroom, Caroline quickly climbed to the top of the sink, opened the ceiling, and took down the paper and pen from above. She hid this when she came back in the early morning before Arnold came back. She quickly wrote a line in the notebook, then tore it, crumpled the paper into a ball, and stuffed it into her pocket. When she went out, Caroline said to Arnold, wait, take out the trash. Don't you men have this habit? Arnold was taken aback. He watched Caroline walk to the garbage basket and began to clean it up. He said in a daze, probably, I'm used to being alone. A person's life can also be more exquisite. Caroline picked up the garbage bag and shrugged. It doesn't matter who we are, right? Arnold suddenly said, what if it becomes two people? Caroline frowned and gave Arnaud a puzzled look. Arnold shook his head and pushed the door open. Nothing. Oh, put on a hat. Caroline didn't say anything. After putting on the hat, she carried the garbage bag and left the dormitory with Arnold. The management staff had long been accustomed to women appearing in the boys' dormitory, so they were not surprised. Caroline threw the garbage bag into the bucket downstairs in the dormitory. After looking around casually, she quickly returned to Arnold. Where are you going? Arnold naturally grabbed Caroline's hand at this time. It's more natural this way. Caroline glanced at him and smiled. I usually collect money. Arnold said, there's a masquerade party at the school's new auditorium today. We can go over and have some fun. Masquerade party? Caroline opened her mouth in surprise. The clothes were provided by the university club. The co-organizer included the university's drama club, so the students could borrow a lot of costumes. Caroline looked at the strange clothes of the men and women in the huge auditorium and gradually got used to it. To be honest, Caroline had been to many places with such a large number of people. Nightclubs, parties, and the homes of the rich. For the students here, Caroline could be described as a veteran. But for Caroline, most of these activities were just for work. Arnold found a green tight suit with a red cloak and a black eye mask. It was Robin Hood's outfit. Come on, don't be in a daze. Let's go to the middle. With that, Arnold pulled up the stupefied Caroline and walked toward the crowd. Caroline also chose a catgirl outfit at this time. Her beautiful figure was set off by the tight leather suit, making her look even sexier. Well, a man's eyes were full of male hormones. Mas que nada, the music that rang out at the party. Arnold lifted Caroline's hand and spun her in the crowd. He looked at Caroline with a smile, full of vitality that was completely different from before. Move. Yes, like this. Don't think too much. Like this. Faster, faster. That's right. Release yourself. Think of yourself as a catgirl. And I'm Robin Hood. Oh, I can't. My head is a little dizzy. It's too fast. Caroline stopped, panting. She held Arnold's shoulder. I haven't exercised like this for a long time. Arnold, on the other hand, revealed a faint smile. The rhythm of the music suddenly slowed down, and he switched to another track. The men and women in the auditorium began to pair up. They were no longer dancing wildly. They shuttled neatly with them, like bees guided by the queen bee's signal. Arnold's hands were naturally placed behind Caroline's waist at this time, and he began to swing slowly. Caroline smiled and said, I thought you were a bookworm. I didn't expect. You are quite skilled at this kind of party. Arnold just smiled. Actually, you are quite suitable for this kind of life. Caroline shook her head and didn't say anything. Arnold said, if you were given a chance to have a new life, like now, would you be willing? Caroline looked up at Arnaud. The soft music was impacting her heart. Perhaps it was because of the surrounding atmosphere, but at this moment, Caroline fell into deep thought about this problem. Maybe we can go to a new place, a place where no one knows us. Arnold gently hugged Caroline and said in a magnetic voice, it's impossible for us to stay in school for the rest of our lives. Once we meet Poston and the others outside, the happiness like today will leave us. Caroline woke up in an instant. She didn't struggle from Arnold's embrace, but she suddenly remembered that this guy used to be a dancer at the Kata Club. Did this guy also use this voice to whisper in Livia's ear? If you leave, what will happen to your efforts over the years? Caroline said, your degree, your job, your future. Are you willing to part with these things? No matter how reluctant I am, it's better than getting into endless trouble. Arnold smiled bitterly. I know, I have always known. As long as my brother is still here, I can't get rid of him in my life. No matter how hard I try, as long as I have this face that looks exactly like his, people will treat me as him. But he suddenly cupped Caroline's face and said softly, but if it's you, if you accompany me, gradually approaching. Caroline's body suddenly stiffened. The moment Arnold approached her, Caroline instinctively pushed him away. Caroline, Arnold called out softly. Caroline lowered her head. Sorry, I'm a little thirsty. I'll go get something to drink. After speaking, without waiting for Arnold to speak, Caroline quickly squeezed into the crowd and left from Arnold's sight. You can let a man kiss anywhere on your body, except for your lips. In front of the bar counter with drinks, Caroline subconsciously touched her lips. What echoed in her mind was what Nia had once told her. Are you tempted? Suddenly, an untimely voice appeared in front of Caroline, waking her up abruptly. This hoarse and terrifying voice, Caroline couldn't forget. It was the voice of 403. In front of her, it was 403. He was still dressed in the same creepy outfit as last night. He looked like a weirdo who had walked out of a movie. Caroline looked around in horror, especially behind her. 403 said indifferently, "Don't be nervous. Don't you see where this is? No one cares about my dressing like this. The students here will only think of me as a scary freak in makeup." Caroline was startled. Then she breathed a sigh of relief. 403 said, "Although that's the case, the irony is that I can appear in the crowd openly like this, instead of hiding in the dark corner. No one will look at me with fear." It was still such a hoarse voice, but it sounded indescribable to Caroline. Caroline hesitated for a moment before saying, "Did you see my note, and specially rush over? For what? Is it?" She knew that 403 planned to take revenge, but she didn't know what 403 wanted to do specifically. But at this moment, 403 suddenly grabbed Caroline's hand and pulled her towards him. Before Caroline could react, 403 had grabbed her chin with one hand and kissed her. Chapter 845. Amidst the music, the students suddenly heard a series of glass shattering after falling to the ground. The moment they looked back, they saw a large number of glasses being swept to the ground at the bar counter. All kinds of drinks were spilled all over the floor. There was also a terrifying guy who had been disguised as a freak on the ground. Robin Hood maintained his punching posture, while the guy on the ground with bandages on his head wiped his lips and slowly stood up. Beside him was a panic-stricken feline girl. Someone hit him. Someone hit him. It seems to be because of jealousy. The onlookers whispered to each other. Caroline was indeed in a state of confusion at this time. She did not expect Arnold to suddenly appear and punch 403 in the face. "Hey, take it easy. I'm just playing a game with her." 403 got up at this time and shrugged. "Do you have a boyfriend? Then forget it." His posture was very casual, as if he was hitting on a woman, and then the woman's boyfriend appeared. He waved his hand and was about to leave. This kind of thing was too common on the streets. "You're courting death." Arnold revealed a terrifying gaze, violent and ferocious. Just as he was about to further teach the guy with bandages on his head a lesson, Caroline grabbed his arm hard and said quickly, "Don't make trouble." But Arnold looked back at Caroline, his anger still not appeased. Caroline shook her head and said, "I don't know him." Before she finished speaking, Caroline looked forward in surprise. Arnold, who noticed Caroline's action, also took a look, only to see that the guy with bandages on his head had gone far away and blended into the crowd. Arnold unwillingly put down his clenched fist. Caroline gently tugged at Arnold's clothes and whispered, "Let's go. It's boring." They returned the clothes to the ball and changed back to their original clothes. Then, without talking, they quietly left the masquerade ball in the auditorium. For the students here, it was just a small episode of flirting and getting beaten up. It did not affect their mood. Soon, passionate music was played in the auditorium. Arnold walked in front while Caroline slowly followed behind. She didn't expect Arnold to be so excited. In a trance, Caroline seemed to understand what 403 wanted to do. She clearly remembered 403's gaze at that time. Even though he was beaten to the ground, his gaze was so happy, as if he was teasing a crazy lion, enjoying the madness of this lion. I really don't know him." Caroline took 2 steps forward and whispered to Arnold. He suddenly came over and kissed me. I couldn't react in time. "I know." Arnold shook his head and said sulkily, "It's probably some self-righteous guy. I've seen a lot of people like him. Don't let me see him next time, or else." Otherwise, Caroline stopped. With her hands behind her back, she turned around and walked in front of Arnaud. She stared at Arnaud with her eyes wide open. "Or what? I'll teach him a good lesson," Arnold said seriously. Caroline suddenly laughed, which made Arnold very puzzled. He hurriedly said, "Don't really think of me as a bookworm. It hurts when I hit people." "I'm not doubting that." Caroline shook her head gently. "The point is, do you know who that person is?" Arnold was startled, and his expression immediately turned ugly. Indeed, that guy's head was wrapped in bandages, and he seemed to have put on makeup. No one would know what he actually looked like. In fact, even if he appeared in front of him in person, he might not be able to recognize him. Arnold wanted to say something, but he found that saying anything would be useless. He couldn't help but feel discouraged. Caroline suddenly approached Arnold and whispered in his ear, "But thank you for this punch for me." The soft voice made Arnold feel a little itchy in his ears. Then he felt a soft touch on his cheek. It was Caroline's quick kiss on his face. Caroline didn't say anything. Arnold felt that it was a little sudden. The two of them only exchanged glances for a moment before Caroline turned around and walked forward. "I'm hungry. Is there any place in this school that has good food? I haven't had a normal meal in a long time. There's a good restaurant in the park." Arnold hurriedly caught up. Caroline, however, suddenly looked elsewhere as if she was in a daze. Arnold followed Caroline's gaze. It turned out that a pair of intimate lovers were walking in front of them. Arnold asked curiously, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Caroline shook her head. "I just think that this woman's clothes look good." "Clothes?" Arnold took a few more glances thoughtfully. Of course, this pair of lovers didn't notice that someone was looking at them. They'd already walked past while chatting and laughing. "Let's go. There's nothing to see." She shrugged and continued to walk forward, but the corner of her eyes still swept across the face of the girl and the pair of lovers who walked past. This girl was the woman who appeared in the photo of Lucas and his girlfriend found in the dormitory. But the man next to her was obviously not Lucas. 403. Arnold doesn't seem to know this girl. Caroline frowned. Was it because Lucas hadn't introduced her before, or was it because Arnold, who had been exchanging identities, had no chance to know of this woman's existence? 403. Was he nearby now? Then, he was also quietly watching, unable to recognize her. In the afternoon, near the evening, after learning that Dr. Frankie had stabilized, Mr. Orphy, who would be fine as long as he woke up, had left not long ago. He couldn't leave the work at hand, so he could only ask Barbara to stay and take care of him. Of course, Barbara was a very responsible servant. She had been accompanying Dr. Frankie in the ward, but there were also people who had to go to the emergency room. Putting down the magazine, Barbara glanced at Dr. Frankie, who was still in a coma, and walked to the bathroom. There was naturally such a configuration in the independent ward. But when Barbara came out of the bathroom, she showed a frightened look. Dr. Frankie was no longer in the hospital bed. The infusion tube was pulled out, a corner of the quilt was lifted, and one of the slippers under the bed was missing. Barbara was so scared that she rushed out of the ward, but she saw Dr. Frankie in the corridor. He didn't go far. His slightly stooped figure was standing in front of the corridor wall, wearing only one slipper. Dr. Frankie was writing something on the wall with his fingers, as if no one was around. Barbara quietly walked behind Dr. Frankie, and he didn't notice. His fingers quickly wrote line after line of something on the wall, but no one knew what he wrote. Barbara couldn't understand what Dr. Frankie wrote. For example, the things in the workshop at home, Barbara felt that they were just scribbles. "Dr. Frankie?" Barbara called out subconsciously. Dr. Frankie trembled slightly at this time, unexpectedly responding to Barbara's call. He turned around, with a trace of doubt in his eyes, and said, "Barbara, why are you here?" Barbara grabbed Dr. Frankie's arm in surprise. "Oh my God! Dr. Frankie, you finally recognized me. What happened?" Dr. Frankie frowned, then looked around blankly and looked at the patient gown on his body and said in surprise, "This is a hospital? Why am I here?" "Doctor, have you forgotten?" Dr. Frankie shook his head as he rubbed his head. "I can't remember it. Can you tell me about it?" "Of course." Barbara nodded and then said, "But this is not the place to talk. Doctor, let's go back to the ward first. Let me tell you, since last night, you really scared us to death. You don't know, Mr. Orphy directly paralyzed the traffic in Rio for more than 2 hours because of you. That's the busiest time during the day." After listening to Barbara's retelling, Dr. Frankie didn't speak for a long time, just staring blankly out of the window. At this time, Barbara came with a glass of water, and at the same time, glanced at the infusion bag next to the bed. She had already called the nurse to come over and re-inject Dr. Frankie with normal saline. "Doctor, drink some water." "Thank you." Barbara sat down and said in a somewhat reproachful tone, "Doctor, don't drink anything next time." "No, I have to hide all the poisonous things at home." Dr. Frankie smiled bitterly, I'm not really crazy, but you looked like you were crazy before, Barbara insisted. Dr. Frankie began to look for something. He looked over the bedside and the cabinet next to it, but didn't seem to find what he was looking for. Barbara couldn't help but ask curiously, Doctor, what are you looking for? My notebook, have you seen it? The brown leather one. Dr. Frankie hurriedly said. Barbara shook her head. What notebook? I didn't see it. It should still be at home, right? Dr. Frankie didn't say anything and just sat down quietly. Seeing that he didn't speak, Barbara began to read the magazine in boredom again. Barbara, I want to leave the hospital. Dr. Frankie suddenly said at this time. Barbara didn't agree. Doctor, you can rest here for a few days and go back when you're well. I'll come over to accompany you these few days. By the way, Mr. Orphy said that he would come over after work. Originally, he didn't want to leave, but he had to attend a meeting in the afternoon, so it's okay. Dr. Frankie shook his head and said, By the way, I'm a little hungry. Can you get me something to eat? Okay, doctor. What do you want to eat? Soup. I want to drink some thick soup. Dr. Frankie slowly said. Barbara hurriedly stood up and said, Wait a moment. I'll go to the hospital cafeteria to see if there's any. Doctor, are you really okay? What problem can I have? I just feel a little bad. Dr. Frankie bitterly smiled. Only then did Barbara nod and quickly leave. But on the way, she called Mr. Orphy and told him that Dr. French had woken up and regained his senses. After learning about this, Mr. Orphy seemed to be in a better mood. After giving a few simple instructions, he went back to work, but also promised to come over in the evening. Not long after Mr. Orphy continued to participate in the meeting, Barbara called again. What's wrong, Barbara? I'm sorry, sir. I don't know. The doctor said that he wanted to eat something, so I went to buy some thick soup, and then, I don't know how to say it. Sir, when I came back, the doctor was gone. This time, he really disappeared. I can't find him. What? At the meeting, Mr. Orphy suddenly stood up under everyone's surprised gaze. On a busy road, an old man in a patient's gown was walking on the street. He waved his hand, and soon a taxi stopped in front of the old man. After getting on the taxi, the driver looked at the old man's clothes and asked curiously, Sir, did you just come out of the hospital? The old man was Dr. Frankie. Dr. Frankie didn't answer at this time, but directly gave an address, Fragrant Hill Avenue, North Street, number 481. This address was where the noble residential area was located, which was the place of the rich. Although the old man seemed to have some problems, the driver didn't find it too strange. Sir, is this your home? In order to liven up the atmosphere, the driver decided to talk with the old man. In fact, many drivers in the industry were talkative. On the long road, they naturally needed to find something to kill time. Well, yes, my home. Dr. Frankie wasn't in the mood to chat. After a simple reply, he didn't look out of the window and ignored the driver. Seeing that the old man didn't want to talk, the driver had to turn on the radio tactfully. But after a while, the old man in the back seat suddenly leaned forward and asked, Where is this? Who are you, and where are you taking me? The driver was startled and said, Sir, aren't we going to number 481, North Street, Fragrant Hill Avenue? That's what you said, a meeting place. Did I say that? Dr. Frankie frowned and then shook his head. I didn't say that. The direction is wrong. Send me to the aerospace branch of the National Scientific Research Institute. Aerospace branch? The driver was stunned. What are you waiting for? Go quickly. Dr. Frankie said in a deep voice, I have a very important experiment to do. This old man, is there something wrong with his brain? The driver glanced at Dr. Frankie suspiciously. After all, he felt that there was something wrong with this old man in a patient's gown. He glanced at the street next to him and saw two policemen patrolling on a road. He hurriedly said, Oh, sir, can you wait for a moment? My son asked me to buy something for him. It's right there. Wait for a moment. I'll be right back. Then, without waiting for Dr. Frankie to speak, he parked the car on the side of the road. After pulling out the car key, he hurriedly walked to the two policemen patrolling. Sir, I just saw an old man in the car. There seems to be something wrong with his brain. Can you see if you can contact his family or something? Is that the person you're talking about? One of the policemen pointed at him. The driver took a look and saw that the strange old man had already sat in another taxi and rushed onto the road. Chapter 846. A crack appeared in the void, and the very rich Wolfgang strolled out. This was the coordinates of the Eternal Night Palace, the gate to paradise lost in the void where the Transcendents lived. Although the Eternal Night Palace in front of him was majestic and huge, it was only a gate to paradise lost in the void. Through the Eternal Night Palace, the Transcendents could teleport to their own residences. The complete paradise lost in the void was formed by the residences of the Transcendents. On a huge platform, a middle-aged man was sitting in a daze. The middle-aged man looked like he had nothing left to live for. His hands and feet were chained, and the end of the chains was nailed to the platform by a huge nail. Wolfgang walked up to the middle-aged man and looked down at him. "Are you the guy who accidentally entered the Eternal Night Palace and was used as bait by the hidden sword?" Middle-aged man. Yu Danxiang heard this and slowly raised his head. His eyes had become cloudy long ago, and it seemed that it took him a long time to realize that this super rich guy was talking to him. It was no wonder that Yu Danxiang's reaction took so long. In this place, there was no day or night, and there was no need to eat. Time seemed to have stopped, and it became meaningless. He didn't even feel tired, and his mind was always in a clear state. But because of this, after an unknown period of time, Yu Danxiang's mind had fallen into a bad state. In order to deal with this situation, his brain took the initiative to make some adjustments. Dazed. "Oh, this original demon of the void looks like a person. No, this is really a person." Suddenly, Fishball Chong realized something. He shuddered and quickly stood up. "Brother, I'm here to help you. Save me. I'm trapped here by a she-devil. It's too dangerous." Wolfgang nodded, then pointed at himself and said slowly, "I'm the companion of the she-devil you're talking about. Yu Danxiang." Yu Danxiang opened his mouth, only to feel despair. Wolfgang suddenly smiled and patted Yu Danxiang's shoulder, saying indifferently, "Continue to wear it. It's good for you. There's so many primordial void demons being devoured by the platform. It would be nice to share some with you." "What do you mean?" Yu Danxiang suddenly grabbed at Wolfgang. However, Wolfgang did not intend to have too much contact with Yu Danxiang. After quickly taking a step back, he smiled and did not say anything. He directly walked past Yu Danxiang and walked towards the Eternal Night Palace. Transcending level experts didn't have a superior and subordinate relationship, but they still abided by some conventions. For example, they wouldn't casually come into contact with another transcending level expert's chosen person. "Wait, bro. Yu Danxiang's voice had already gradually disappeared. After entering the Eternal Night Palace, Wolfgang quickly arrived at a large hall. This was a place that was not serious, but was filled with a desolate aura. Because rather than calling this a large hall, it would be better to call this a sword graveyard. The cross-shaped high platform ran through the four directions of the Great Hall, and on the floor below the high platform, there were countless swords. Sharp treasured swords, murderous swords that emitted a cold light, broken swords, withered swords that were mottled with rust. In the center of the high platform, a young girl was sitting cross-legged. She had short black hair, but the moment she opened her eyes, she saw silver pupils. "Wolfgang." The little girl frowned, as if she was very surprised to see this super rich guy. "I heard you were in contact with the Queen of Hell. Did you succeed?" "Oh, that's the day I was looking forward to. Unfortunately, it hasn't come yet." Wolfgang shook his head. "I'm not as lucky as you, Miss Hidden Sword." That being said, Wolfgang couldn't help but ridicule in his heart. This girl couldn't even be counted as waiting for a rabbit to come out a tree stump. A true soul fell from the sky. What the F***CK was this? "What's the matter?" Hidden Sword asked indifferently. Wolfgang directly stated his purpose. "Of course, I hope you, the manager of the gate, can open the portal for me. I have something to do." "Coordinates?" Hidden Sword asked directly. Wolfgang said, "Can I set the coordinates myself? I don't want people to know where I want to go." Hidden Sword didn't say anything. She was only responsible for guarding the Eternal Night Palace and looking after all the portals in Paradise Lost. In theory, all the Supreme Level Masters had the right to use the portal. Wolfgang's request was not a big deal. Most of the time, The Supreme-level Masters didn't want other Supreme-level Masters to know about their interactions. Of course, as the manager of the portal, even if Wolfgang set the coordinates himself, she would still know. The so-called setting the coordinates himself was just to prevent the next person to use the portal from finding clues. Hidden Sword waved her hand. Under the cross-shaped platform, several sharp and cold swords rushed up and formed a ring in front of Wolfgang. The surrounding space seemed to be frozen. The frost even spread to Wolfgang's feet. Hidden Sword said indifferently, "Go in." Oh, the theme of the portal changed again. Wolfgang looked at it and said casually, "I remember the last time I used it. It was Thunderflame." Hidden Sword slowly closed his eyes and began to meditate again. Wolfgang was already used to it. Which Supreme-level Master didn't have a special hobby? For example, this administrator lady was actually a person who especially liked cool special effects. And this manager lady basically didn't talk much with others. Perhaps it was because of her personality that she was appointed as the manager of this place. He strode into the ice-themed teleportation door and quickly disappeared. Hidden Sword waved her hand, and the cold swords that formed the portal returned to the sword tomb below. Hidden Sword opened her eyes and muttered, "This coordinate is the demon of the void?" Birds chirped and flowers bloomed. It was like a peach garden. The moment the door opened, Wolfgang strolled in the courtyard filled with the fragrance of flowers. In front of him was a birdcage-like pavilion. A man was sitting and leaning on a pillar. The man's fingers were pale, but the bird stayed at his fingertips. When Wolfgang walked into the pavilion, the man slowly turned his head. He had long and straight silver-gray hair. There was a red cinnabar mole between his eyebrows. At the same time, his eyes were closed. Because he didn't have eyesight, he couldn't see anything. "Noah." Wolfgang stood with his hands behind his back and gently called the man's name. "Let me borrow your gem sword." The man, Noah, smiled and said, "The gem sword interferes with the parallel world. It has been forbidden to use it." Wolfgang said, No, don't be so exaggerated. I'm just looking for someone in the main world. They're all on the same line." "Who are you looking for?" "Lucifer." Wolfgang said helplessly, "Her Majesty the Queen is missing. It is speculated that she has entered the lost zone of the main world. In that case, there is no need to use the gem sword." Noah stood up, and the little bird flew away from his fingertips. "I'll just accompany you to the modern. Haven't you not left your courtyard for decades?" Wolfgang couldn't help but be surprised. Noah said indifferently, "Recently, there have been some problems with the Seventh Earth. The interference seems to be from the main world. I plan to go and take a look." Wolfgang was surprised. "What's the problem?" Noah shook his head. "I'm not sure yet. There is a case of sudden death on the Seventh Earth, but according to the original trajectory, she shouldn't have died." Wolfgang frowned. She actually broke away from her own destiny. Could it be the aptitude of a transcendent? She actually appeared on the Seventh Earth? No. If she had the aptitude of a transcendent, how could she have died? However, Noah said, she was just a very ordinary mother. She suddenly died in a car accident, along with her newborn child. Noah said this and shook his head. "Well, I will investigate the interference myself, but it will be after I help you find Lucifer. By the way, where did she go missing in the end?" "Rio," Wolfgang said frankly. At this time, Noah opened his mouth slightly and revealed a surprised expression, which greatly surprised Wolfgang. "What? You already know something?" Noah shook his head and muttered, "The mother I'm talking about is also in Rio? Is it a coincidence? In that case, let's quickly descend to the main world." With that said, Wolfgang opened the ice-themed sword gate. However, Noah shook his head and said indifferently, "Use my book of space to descend. It will be faster this way." Wolfgang shrugged with an indifferent expression. Who asked him to be so capricious? After all, he was one of the founders of Paradise Lost. According to the rules, employees who had left their jobs were not allowed to enter the research institute, even if this person used to have an important position in the research institute. However, after all, a lot of national technology and secrets were involved, so even people like the founding members could not be casually let in. Dr. Frankie, it's not that I don't want to let you in, but the rules are like this. The guard looked at Dr. Frankie, who was wearing a patient's clothes rather helplessly, and said patiently, "But you have been relieved of all your duties. If I let you in, it will be difficult for me to explain it to the higher-ups. When was I relieved of all my duties? Are you new here?" Facing the obstruction of the guards, Dr. Frankie couldn't help but be angry and kept arguing with the guards here. This matter was quickly spread to the head of the police station. The director of the Research Institute hurriedly rushed out. The people here actually respected Dr. Frankie quite a lot. After all, he had made indelible contributions to the aerospace industry. But there were merits and demerits. Back then, because of Dr. Frankie's stubbornness, a major disaster occurred, causing the Research Institute to lose a large number of talents. To be honest, over the years, Dr. Frankie had not been well-liked in the Scientific Research Institute. Many of the staff members who were still in the Scientific Research Institute had lost their relatives and friends in that disaster. Therefore, their hatred for Dr. Frankie had not faded away with time. In general, this old man was the target of exclusion. As an old friend of Dr. Frankie's, the director wanted to help, but there was nothing he could do. In fact, after receiving the request from Dr. Frankie's son, Orphe, this time, he even felt relieved. The director originally thought that Dr. Frankie would quietly live the rest of his life after this, but he didn't expect that after a few days, he would take the initiative to come to the door. "Frankie, old man, what's wrong with you? Why do you look like you just came out of the hospital?" The director waved the guard and looked at Dr. Frankie with a frown. "Oh, why do you look so old?" Dr. Frankie looked at his old friend in surprise, then quickly shook his head. "Let's not talk about this for now. Hurry up and let these guys in." "Are you kidding me? When was I given position? There are only a few months left until the launch test. How can you remove me at this time?" The director was taken aback and said, "Old man, do you really not know, or are you pretending not to know? Your son asked me to do this." "Oh, actually, I didn't want to do this. But Orphe is already the Minister of National Defense and Security. He asked me to do this, so I really can't refuse." "Wait, what do you mean the launch test is only a few months left? When did Orphe become the Minister of National Defense?" The two looked at each other in surprise at the same time. The director looked at Dr. Frankie again, then hesitated and said, "Frankie, you don't seem to be in a good condition." Dr. Frankie frowned and said, I know. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I have to go back to the laboratory. I know the key point." With that, Dr. Frankie ignored the director and walked directly over. The director was startled at this time, frowned, and quickly waved at the guards. The guards understood and quickly followed, directly grabbing Dr. Frankie's arm, not letting him leave. "Let go. What do you want to do?" The director walked up at this time, looked at Dr. Frankie, and said, "Old man, they're just taking you to change your clothes. You're not going to go in like this, are you? The Research Institute has its own rules." "Oh, yes." Dr. Frankie realized, strange, why am I wearing this kind of clothes? The director then ordered the guards to take Dr. Frankie away, but they sent him to the reception room and then picked up the phone. "Orphe, it's me." "Well, Frankie is with me. It doesn't seem to be in a good condition." "Okay, I'll wait for you." "Got it. I'll keep Frankie, don't worry." In front of Mr. Orphe's house, the servant girl in trousers pressed the doorbell casually. She actually knew there was no one inside. However, if the owner was here, he would usually press the doorbell. After the doorbell rang a few times, Yui put her hand on the door lock, gently turned it, and pushed the door open. "Sorry to disturb you." Chapter 847. After a simple handshake, Mr. Orphe quickly followed the director into the Research Institute. "Where is he?" Mr. Orphe was quite direct. Perhaps because he had been in a high position for a long time, he directly ignored the fact that he was an elder of the director. "In a conference room. I've asked someone to comfort Frankie." The director shook his head. What happened to Frankie? In fact, Mr. Orphe could not help but briefly describe what happened in the morning, and then said, "I've consulted several doctors. Their preliminary judgment is that he was overstimulated, causing memory disorder. He needs time to untangle the knot in his heart." The director sighed. Of course, he knew what Dr. Frankie's knot was. He also knew what the knot between Orphe and Frankie was. In front of the conference room door, the director stopped. "You can go in by yourself." Mr. Orphe was not a pretentious person. He simply nodded when he heard the director. But when he was about to push the door open, the door was opened first. The person who walked out was a man in a white coat. He was about 30 years old. Mr. Orphe speculated that this man should be arranged by the director to comfort his father. So he just nodded and quickly said, "Thank you for your hard work." Of course, this researcher knew Mr. Orphe, but at this moment, in the face of Mr. Orphe's thanks, he could only shake his head hurriedly. The reporter's expression was a bit anxious, and he quickly said, "Director, perhaps you should really see what Dr. Frankie wrote. I don't know how to say it, but it's too magical. Dr. Frankie is simply a genius, a great genius." Looking at the excited researcher, Mr. Orphe and the director instantly looked at each other in astonishment. Then, Mr. Orphe subconsciously pushed the door open. He gently pushed it open like a child pushing a heavy door. In the conference room, Dr. Frankie was standing on the edge of the wall. Just like what Mr. Orphe saw in the workshop at home, the wall was now densely filled with formulas written by Dr. Frankie with a pen. They slowly walked into the conference room, walking very softly. At this moment, the director raised his head and looked at what Dr. Frankie wrote. He subconsciously adjusted his glasses, his mouth slightly opened, and gradually became surprised. In the end, the director's expression suddenly changed dramatically. "Paper. Pen." The director simply said 2 words, and the researcher hurriedly found a stack of A4 paper from the cabinet in the corner of the conference room. Then he took out the ballpoint pen clipped to his clothes and handed it to the director. At this time, the director sat down directly. Sometimes he would copy what Dr. Frankie wrote on the wall, and sometimes he would focus on drawing something on the formula that he had copied. "My God, it's actually solved like this. This is a brand new algorithm. How'd he do it? How'd he do it?" The director repeatedly exclaimed in amazement, as if Columbus had discovered a whole new continent. At this time, the researcher also took another piece of paper and pen, copied the director, and analyzed and calculated by himself while copying the director. While he was pleasantly surprised, he directly said, "Look, with this kind of kinetic energy, the power output can be increased by 5% according to preliminary estimation." They discussed enthusiastically and forgot themselves, just like Dr. Frankie who was writing something on the wall. Mr. Orphe suddenly felt that he didn't belong to this place. He quietly looked at Dr. Frankie's back, but what he thought it was many years ago when he was young. Whether it was at home or in the research institute, he would always see this back view, immersed in his own world. He neglected his family, neglected everything. He opened his mouth, intending to wake up everyone in the conference room, but he didn't know why he swallowed the words back when he was about to say them. It wasn't difficult for Mr. Orphe to figure out that at this moment, his father was writing something very important to the entire research institute, so much so that the director and the researcher would lose themselves like this. Mr. Orphe silently stepped back 2 steps and then sat down on the chair near the wall. No one knew how this news spread. Perhaps a researcher who passed by saw this scene and walked in to take a look out of curiosity. Then he saw the director who was looking at Dr. Frankie's back like a student. Then he was also surprised by the knowledge on the wall. In the end, he quietly took the money and sat at the conference table. Gradually, 1, 2, 3, the empty conference table was filled with people. There were young people, middle-aged people, and even people of the same age as the director. Then, next to the conference table, 1, 2. Gradually, there were more and more people, and the conference room became crowded. There was a lot of discussion, but it was surprisingly kept at a very low decibel level. It seemed that they were all afraid of disturbing Dr. Frankie and his pen, which was writing a lot of new knowledge. The process of researchers absorbing knowledge was a crazy and selfless process. They were even more devout than the believers who went to church. A female researcher with glasses was looking down at her notebook at this moment, walking past Mr. Orphe. The female researcher's shoe even stepped on Mr. Orphe's foot, but she didn't notice it. Then she walked back again, and stepped on his foot again. Mr. Orphy was a little angry. He coughed slightly, intending to let the female researcher pay attention. Unexpectedly, the female researcher glared at him and made a gesture of silence. Mr. Orphy stood up helplessly and squeezed out of the conference room through the crowd. At this time, Mr. Orphy found that the corridor was actually full of people. They were glued to the glass window of the conference room, looking attentively. There were even many people sitting on the floor. Someone squeezed out of the conference room and spread out the things he had written on the ground. Immediately, someone moved over to take a look. Mr. Orphy shook his head. In this case, he was afraid that he couldn't take Dr. Frankie away. Otherwise, even if he had the title of Minister of National Security, he was afraid that he would be criticized by these researchers. Mr. Orphy helplessly came to the pantry alone, but he saw a security guard here. The security guard walked in and recognized Mr. Orphy. He instantly stood straight and saluted Mr. Orphy. Mr. Orphy shook his head and said self-mockingly, "After I get off work, I'm no different from you. Relax. For example, they can completely ignore me, right? They're all men with high scientific knowledge. They're different." The security guard could probably imagine what Mr. Orphy had encountered. Even so, he still didn't dare to be too comfortable in front of Mr. Orphy. Instead, he always remained cautious. "Sir, the water heater is broken. It doesn't work sometimes. Now we can only get cold water." Mr. Orphy gave a start. After so many years, this water heater is still broken? It hasn't been replaced? It hasn't been repaired. And you can get hot water from other places. The security guard said, "I heard that it was to save some money. The director often nags that the state's funding is getting less and less." "You just said, after so many years?" He looked at Mr. Orphy in surprise. But Mr. Orphy didn't say anything. Instead, he rolled up his sleeves and walked to the back of the water heater. Under the security guard's surprised gaze, he easily opened the back cover of the water heater and started to tinker with it. But after a while, the water heater actually started to work. The security guard was amazed. "Oh, sir, you're amazing. My wife often says the same." Mr. Orphy shook his head. "Although, I only know how to tinker with these things. I used to study mechanical and electrical engineering. I could still do simple maintenance." The security guard was startled and suddenly remembered some gossip in the research institute. This high-ranking officer's wife seemed to have worked here before, and she was also a high-ranking researcher. "Oh, right." Mr. Orphy seemed to have remembered something. He looked at the security guard and said, "Call some people and pour some water for those guys in the meeting room. Otherwise, they will die of thirst. Look at them. I don't know if they will drink anything. No matter how thirsty they are, they won't drink anything." Even so, the security guard still nodded. Mr. Orphy walked out of the pantry with a glass of water, but suddenly stopped and turned around, asking, "By the way, room 118 on the 5th floor, whose office is it now?" The security guard was stunned for a moment before he quickly said, "That office has always been empty and empty. It's said that Dr. Frankie—" "Oh, your father asked for it to be empty." "Really?" Mr. Orphy pondered and turned to leave. "Do your job. Don't mind me. I'll just walk around." Until Mr. Orphy completely left his sight, the security guard breathed a sigh of relief. When Mr. Orphy was there, he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. In front of the room marked 118, Mr. Orphy had been standing quietly for a few minutes. But at this moment, many researchers were gathered in the conference room downstairs, so it was very quiet here. Naturally, no one came to disturb him. Even Mr. Orphy looked so weird at this time, because not only was he standing in front of the door, but he also put the phone to his ear without speaking. Faintly, a woman's voice could be heard from the phone. "Voicemail. Is it? Next week is Louis's birthday? Oh my God. I'm such a failure as a mother. Beep. Orphy, when this experiment succeeds, I'll definitely ask for a leave from my teacher. We haven't traveled together for a long time. You'll be free, right? Beep. Orphy, how's your work? Beep. Sorry, I was too tired and fell asleep, so I didn't hear your call. You should be asleep at this time. Did you drink a glass of milk before going to bed? Love you. Beep. Hard. It's not hard because it's also my dream. Beep. Mr. Orphy finally put down the phone, reaching out to touch the door number faintly saying, "Margie, I'm fine. Please don't worry." "Mr. Orphy, you're here. Dr. Frankie has fainted. Please go and take a look." From afar, the voice of the security guard that Zhang Tai met in the pantry sounded. "I'll be right there." Mr. Orphy instantly stepped out, saying in a low voice, "Has the ambulance been called?" "Yes, it has." It was already night. Arnold looked at the closed bathroom door of dormitory 403, then quickly took out a bag from the drawer and stuffed it into his school bag. After putting away the things, Arnold walked to the bathroom door, knocked a few times, and the sound of water inside stopped. "What's the matter?" Arnold said. "I'm going to the library. Maybe back a little late." Caroline opened the curtain, frowned, and quickly responded, "Okay, I'll wait for you to come back. You have to be careful." Arnold smiled, gently patted the door, and said with ease, "It's okay, don't worry." He quickly opened the door and locked it, but didn't leave immediately. After hesitating for a while, Arnold finally took out a small thread and put it in the gap of the door. He carried his school bag and left the boys' dormitory. Of course, it was not to review in the library. When Arnold passed by the convenience store not far downstairs, he suddenly stopped. He went straight in, bought a condom from the counter, and then left. But before he took a few steps, someone patted his shoulder from behind, and at the same time, a voice called his real name, "Haley, where are you going?" "Arnold." Haley's eyes widened in an instant. He felt that the hand on his shoulder was not strong, but it made him feel weak all over. This was Boston's voice. Haley quietly murmured and slowly turned around, only to see Boston looking at him calmly. I have an appointment with a few students, and I'm going to sell something to them." "Oh, is that so? What a coincidence." Boston shrugged. Haley said calmly, Why did you suddenly come here? I didn't slack off, you can rest assured." Boston shrugged and said contemptuously, "Do you dare? Don't think too much. I don't have time to stare at you. I'm here to send Arnold Boss here." "Arnold?" Haley's face suddenly changed. "He came on. There's an exam tomorrow. Have you forgotten?" Arnaud slowly walked out of the shadow next to him. He came in front of Haley, sized him up, and said indifferently, "It's time to change back." "What's the matter? Why do you have such a weird expression?" Haley hurriedly said, "I'm going to deliver the goods. If I change back now, how about later?" Arnold glanced at Haley suspiciously and frowned. "No need. Let Boston accompany you there. You could take Boston's car and leave after you're done. I won't come out after going back to the dormitory." "Why, is there a problem?" No. Haley lowered his head. Boston walked over, put his hand on Haley's shoulder, and said frivolously, "If there's no problem, let's go. Hurry up and deliver the goods, and then we can have fun." "Haley, don't say I didn't take care of you. I just opened a new nightclub, and it's very good." Is that so?" Haley felt his legs go weak. "What should I do?" I hid the matter about Caroline from Arnold. Wait a minute. If Arnold returns to the dormitory and sees Caroline, what should I do? He was secretly anxious, but at this moment, Arnold suddenly called out to him, "Wait a minute, don't go yet." Haley's pupils suddenly contracted, but Boston was very obedient. He directly turned Haley's shoulder back and said, "Boss, what else do you want? Say it." Arnold said indifferently, "Haley, you forgot to give me the key to the dormitory." "Key? Oh, yes. Haley hurriedly put down his school bag and began to rummage through it. However, after rummaging for a while, he finally rummaged through his pockets and said helplessly, "I seem to have forgotten to bring the key. I must have been in a hurry when I came out. These students are very impatient, and they even have to specify delivery or something." "Why are you panicking?" "I didn't say anything." Arnold shook his head. "Forget it if you forgot to bring it. I'll find the administrator. You guys go quickly." "Okay, boss." Boston responded directly. Haley didn't dare to say anything more. He directly let Boston push him and strode away. Arnold narrowed his eyes and watched Haley leave. Only then did he quietly hide in the shadows. He walked along the shadows until he reached the dormitory building. He waited for a while until no one was coming in or out. Then he quickly walked in. He soon arrived at the administrator's room. When the administrator saw him enter, he subconsciously said, "What's the matter? Didn't you just go out? Have any strange people come by recently?" Arnold asked indifferently. The administrator was stunned. Then, he stood up and respectfully said, "Boss." As he spoke, the administrator quickly pulled Arnold in and closed the door. He said, "No suspicious people came by. Don't worry, boss." Arnold nodded. Then, he took out a roll of cash and placed it on the table. "This month's salary. Count it yourself." Thank you, boss." The administrator chuckled. He quickly licked his fingers and began to count the cash. Arnold suddenly asked, "Is there anything strange about Haley?" The administrator casually said, "Nothing strange. He just comes and goes." "Oh, right. He brought a woman back and has been staying for a few days." "A woman? What woman?" Arnold frowned. The administrator said, "She looks quite unfamiliar. I don't think I've seen her before, but she's quite pretty. Boss, she should still be in the dormitory. Maybe you can." "Do your job," Arnold said indifferently. "Give me the key." Chapter 848. Wait a minute. When he passed by a teaching building, Haley suddenly stopped and told Boston that he wanted to go to the toilet. Boston shrugged and said he would wait for him outside. Haley then quickly walked into the teaching building. When he was about to leave Boston's line of sight, Haley quietly looked back and found that Boston was about to light up a cigarette. He then stepped into the building and left Boston's line of sight. After that, Haley walked 2 steps faster and then ran wildly. There were many entrances and exits in a well-connected teaching building. Haley repeatedly looked back and finally stopped at another exit. He turned around and looked behind him. Only when he didn't see any trace of Boston did he let out a sigh of relief. Then next, "Haley, where are you going? Is this the way to deliver the goods?" Unexpectedly, at this moment, Boston put his palm on Haley's shoulder again. He didn't know when Boston caught up with him. Haley took a deep breath. "Hey, I was going to look for you. Why are you here?" He quietly clenched his fist, intending to take advantage of this moment to punch Boston's face. But before he could do that, a huge force had already hit his nose. Boston was faster than him. After Boston hit Haley's nose, he immediately threw a knee to Haley's abdomen. Haley directly bent over in pain. At this time, Boston grabbed Haley's hair and pulled him up. "Hey, Haley, Boss Arnold told me to keep an eye on you." Haley struggled a few times, but was easily beaten to the ground by Boston. As the most powerful guy in Arnold's team, it was really easy for Boston to beat Haley down. "It seems that you are hiding something from us." Poston grabbed Haley, who had spat out a mouthful of blood, and said, "I think I need to properly greet you." In the darkness, a pair of cold eyes silently watched everything that happened. They silently watched Haley's futile resistance and was finally taken away by Boston. Then, they quietly hid in the darkness. Room 403. In front of the door of room 403, Arnold stopped. His gaze swept through the gap of the door. After seeing the thread that was placed there, he didn't say anything. Anua's gaze shifted, and he directly opened the door and entered. At a glance, he could see the environment of the dormitory. There was no one, but he could hear the sounds coming from the bathroom. Anua narrowed his eyes and kept a certain distance from the bathroom. He moved slowly, but his eyes never left the bathroom door. It seemed that it was about to come out. The person inside, Arnold had already moved to the table, quietly picked up the knife on the table, and hid it behind his back. Crack! Caroline walked out of the bathroom, lowering her head and wiping her hair with a towel. However, when she saw Arnold in the room, she was obviously stunned for a moment. She subconsciously asked, "Didn't you say you were going to the library?" "Library?" Arnaud glanced at Caroline, then slowly walked to the sofa and sat down. He shook his head and said, "I'm not feeling well. I don't want to go anymore." Arnold, who sat down, quietly stuffed the knife into the gap of the sofa. Then, he turned on the TV, casually with his back to Caroline. "I didn't expect it. Haley." Arnold narrowed his eyes again. "Not feeling well?" Caroline was stunned. Then, she thought for a moment, poured a glass of water, and put it in front of Arnold. At the same time, she sat down and continued to dry her hair. Except for the sound of the TV, there was no conversation. At this time, the phone suddenly rang. It was Arnold's cell phone. Arnold glanced at it and saw that it was Poston calling. Caroline asked curiously, "Aren't you going to answer it?" "Oh, there's no caller ID. Maybe it's a salesman." Arnold smiled and casually turned off the phone. At the same time, he asked, "By the way, how do you feel today?" Caroline leaned comfortably on the sofa and said rather relaxedly, "Not bad. Thank you for taking me out to play. Otherwise, I would have been bored to death." "That's good." Arnold nodded and said, "Thank you for your hard work these days." Caroline shook her head. "What's wrong? Why are you suddenly so emotional?" Arnold said, "Probably at night. I think more things, so it's easy to overthink." "What else? Don't you have other thoughts?" Caroline opened her mouth and remembered what Arnold said to her at the masquerade party. She said, "Can you give me some time to think about that thing?" "Of course." Arnold nodded. "Of course. I should give you some time." Arnold stood up and walked to the fridge. He opened the fridge door and glanced at it. "Do you want to drink something? I'll go downstairs and buy it." "Beer. Why didn't you think of coming when you just came back?" After Arnold left the seat, Caroline lay down directly. "I'm going to die without beer." "Then wait for me. I'll be back soon." Arnold smiled and went out. She felt that something was wrong. Caroline frowned, but suddenly found that there seemed to be something hard pressing against her leg. She put her hand into the gap of the sofa and took out the remote control of the TV. Caroline was stunned, shrugged, and watched the TV. When Arnold arrived, Boston was playing a mobile game. However, at this time, Boston was sitting on Haley. The corner of Haley's mouth was broken. One of his eyes was swollen, and his head was full of sweat. He was in so much pain that cold sweat kept oozing out. Seeing that Arnold had arrived, Boston quickly stood up, but he was still stepping on Haley's back, pressing him down. "Boss, this guy won't say anything. He said he wants to wait for you to come over." Arnold nodded and looked around. In such a short time, Boston naturally didn't leave the university. This was an activity room in the teaching building. "You go out first," Arnold ordered indifferently. Poston nodded. Before he left, he flipped Haley over and walked past Arnold. "Boss, I'll wait for you outside." Arnold dragged a stool, put it next to Haley, and sat down. He looked at Haley, who was lying on the ground, then bent down and grabbed Haley's chin. He shook it from side to side and looked at the injuries on his face. Their gazes were fixed on each other. Arnold finally let go of his hand. "Caroline." Haley moved his lips, but didn't say anything. Arnold sighed. "You know I'm looking for her. Tell me, why did you hide it from me?" Haley didn't say anything. Arnold seemed to be very patient. He looked at Haley and said indifferently, "If you don't say it, then let me guess. When I went back, she called me by my name. That is to say, she doesn't know you're Haley, and she doesn't know you killed Livia. Well, you hid it from her." Arnold looked at Haley's evasive eyes and said coldly, "You're interested in her?" Haley suddenly sneered. "Is that possible? Why would I be interested in a promiscuous prostitute? Even if I'm interested, it's just because I want to have some fun. Like toying with that Leviathan?" Arnold asked calmly. "Like Livia," Haley said expressionlessly. Anua nodded and said with a smile, "I knew it. How could you do something bad to me? You also didn't want to run away secretly, right?" "Yes. Yes, I wouldn't." Haley nodded faintly. Arnold suddenly knelt down on the ground and grabbed Haley's hand. A cold light flashed, and Haley let out a miserable scream. The scream was very long. Haley opened his eyes wide, and his face was twisted in pain. He breathed with difficulty, and what he saw was a small knife stabbed into his palm. It was the knife in room 403. Arnold was now in front of Haley and kept making shoo-shoo sounds. He reached out and touched Haley's face and whispered, "Don't you remember who helped you deal with Livia's body?" Haley struggled a few times, but Anua held his body down. Arnold said coldly, "Have you forgotten who killed your parents?" Haley seemed to have been triggered. He suddenly roared, "I didn't." He rushed up to me himself. I didn't. He wanted to hit me. I didn't." "You didn't? Then why are you begging me?" Arnold grabbed Haley's hair, lifted him up, and hit him on the floor. "Begging me to help you? Do you want me to help you remember how you knelt in front of me, said you regretted it, and asked me to help you?" I didn't." Haley stopped struggling and stared blankly at the ceiling. I didn't. Arnold pulled the knife out of Haley's hand. This action tore open the wound, causing Haley to hold his hand in pain and curl up his body. "It's all right now." Arnold helped Haley up and sat him on a stool. Then, he stroked Haley's hair and said slowly, It's all right now. Haley, you won't betray me, right? We are all accomplices, and we have been stained with the blood of our family. We came to this world together. We will never be separated. My dear brother. Haley remained motionless. Did Caroline say anything to you? Arnold was standing behind Haley at this time. He gently pressed his hands on Haley's shoulders and whispered in his ear, "About that bank card?" Arnold's hands tightened slightly. She said that a mysterious person entrusted her with the money, but the money in it can't be used. Otherwise, there will be big trouble, big trouble. It's possible that it's dirty money. Is there anything else? How to contact her? Arnold asked again. Haley shook his head. Arnold let go of his hands and suddenly said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt Caroline. After the exam tomorrow, I will leave and take your place. You could do whatever you want." With that, Arnold left the activity room. He looked at Boston outside the door and said, "Take him to treat his wound and bring him back tomorrow. Be careful. Don't let him run away." "Understood, boss." Boston nodded quickly. He glanced at Hai Li, who was in the activity room, and saw that his hands were hanging down and blood was dripping from his fingers. However, he didn't move at all. He thought to himself, "Boss is amazing. This Hai Li, is he really going to be a cripple? Sorry, I met a classmate downstairs and chatted with her." Arnold opened the door, only to see that Caroline had fallen asleep on the sofa. After putting the beer in the fridge, he took a blanket and covered Caroline with it. Then he sat in front of the desk. Arnold turned off the light and left only a desk lamp on. He then took down the books and reference books from the bookshelf and began to work on the questions in the books. The light was turned on. It was a separate ward in the hospital. At this time, Mr. Orphy, who was sleeping on the sofa, suddenly woke up because of the light. "Oh, sorry, sir, I woke you up." "I didn't know." Barbara looked at Mr. Orphy apologetically. After Dr. Frankie got lost in the hospital during the day, he was only found in the evening. However, he was sent back by the ambulance. "It's okay. I still want to apologize to you for making you work overtime." Mr. Orphy shook his head and said, "Don't worry, I'll pay you for your overtime. That's not a problem." Barbara smiled and said, "Sir, you can't handle it alone. By the way, I brought you some clothes and food from home. Maybe you can use the bathroom inside to take a shower. It will make you more comfortable." "Thank you." Mr. Orphy nodded gratefully. Barbara shrugged and said, "If you really want to thank me, sir, you should find a wife as soon as possible. That way, I'll be much more relaxed." Orphy said casually, "Then I'm afraid you'll lose your job. Let's stop talking about this." Barbara rolled her eyes and began to pack up the things she brought from home. When she took out a brown notebook from her backpack, Mr. Orphy asked curiously, "What's that?" Barbara said casually, "This is the doctor's notebook, right? He woke up once during the day and said he was looking for this. When I went home to pack, I found it in the doctor's coat pocket and brought it over. He seemed quite nervous." "Is there anything written in it?" Mr. Orphy wiped his face and asked casually. "I didn't look." Barbara shrugged and said, "The servant's rule is not to look at the master's private things. I'm a very professional person. I'll still pay overtime according to the legal rules. It won't be much." Barbara pointed a middle finger at him. Mr. Orphy smiled and felt relaxed. He walked to the table and picked up the notebook. He walked to the sofa and opened it. It seemed to be something like a diary. "Sir, I'll go wash these fruits first." "Oh, go ahead." Mr. Orphy waved his hand. The first page. "I left home at 7:30 in the morning. Barbara made scones for breakfast and a glass of milk. I ate 3 scones and a glass and a half of milk. I arrived at the Research Institute at 8:55 in the morning. Because of the traffic jam, I was 17 minutes later than usual. The traffic was not good today, and there was a car accident on the 3rd road. I attended the regular meeting at 9:45 in the morning. I put the meeting minutes in the 3rd drawer of my desk. Matthew called me at 10:16 in the morning and asked me to have dinner this Saturday night. I said yes. Gradually, Mr. Orphy began to frown. It was not that he had never read a diary before, but it was rare for him to see a diary that was so detailed about every single thing. Mr. Orphy gradually felt something was wrong. I got off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Orphy didn't come back at 9:17 in the evening. I planned to sleep. I felt a little tired today. The medicine prescribed by the doctor was almost finished. I had to remember to go to the hospital tomorrow. My memory was getting worse and worse. I didn't know how long the medicine would last. Hopefully, I could still remember something clearly. Even if I forget who I am, even if I forget the way home. Hopefully, I could still remember Orphe. Hopefully, I could still remember Louis. Hopefully, when I saw them, I could still call out their names. Father, sir, what's wrong? Barbara came out with the washed fruits and saw Mr. Orphe lowering his head and covering his eyes. She couldn't help but walk over curiously. Mr. Orphe wiped his face and said with a hoarse voice, "Nothing. Maybe I'm a little tired." Chapter 849. Whether it was because she didn't want to disappoint Song Tianyu or because she wanted to win the upcoming competition, Song Ying couldn't let her guard down about inviting the god of gamblers back into the game, even if she had to bring along a burden who didn't know anything to complete this task. Song Ying's movements were very fast. After Father Song gave his instructions in the morning, she personally found Luocchio's temporary residence after lunch. This was the inner courtyard of my humble house, a place with multiple layers of security. Only members of the Song family had the right to live here. Master Chiu naturally didn't need to wait. Clatter! Song Ying placed a thick stack of books in front of Luocchio, causing the table to vibrate. Luocchio curiously picked up the topmost book and flipped through it a few times, then looked at Song Ying and asked, "Are these books for me?" The stack of books was about 40 or so thick, and without exception, they were all about red wine, covering the origin of red wine, brewing techniques, culture, and so on. Of course, red wine was a very big academic subject. Although these books were thick, they were probably just a drop in the ocean of red wine culture. "For you to read," Song Ying said indifferently. "Next, we will personally visit the god of gamblers, so the knowledge in these books should come in handy. Don't worry, I won't be so inhumane as to make you memorize the contents backwards. I just hope that when we talk about red wine, you won't be dumbfounded. Just finish reading them tonight. Tomorrow, I will give you some impromptu wine tasting training." Reading over 40 or so books in one night, there were at least a dozen of them. Wasn't that inhumane? I will try my best to pick the ones that interest me. Luocchio nodded, not angry. The packaging of these books wasn't ordinary, and they gave Luocchio a heavy sense of history. With the Song family's financial resources, there was probably some precious information mixed in. Luocchio had always held the attitude that the more knowledge, the better. Now that someone had come knocking on his door, he naturally did not intend to politely refuse. Song Ying, who had a certain understanding of Luocchio's temper, was too lazy to care about Luocchio's perfunctory tone. She directly said, "The god of gamblers doesn't have many hobbies, but red wine is one of them. Otherwise, he wouldn't have retired and built a vineyard for himself. I received news that the god of gamblers will be holding a new wine tasting at his manor the day after tomorrow. I'll get the invitation, so you can accompany me there. Consider it as an explanation to my grandfather." Luocchio thought about it for a moment. In fact, he was already used to an environment where all the little things were properly arranged. Although he was only planning to go through the motions with Father Song's request, it wasn't good to be too inactive. With the extension of his vacation, some of his indifferent ideas showed signs of rekindling. Luocchio didn't know to what extent he could recover, so he only wanted to find out, so he was very satisfied with Song Ying's arrangement. "It's been hard on you." Luocchio nodded. "It's not hard at all. Your sister." Song Ying suddenly felt that there was something wrong with the context. Why did it feel like she had become this guy's assistant? Luocchio just smiled and flipped through a few books. Then, he picked one that he liked for the time being. But after reading a few pages, Luocchio looked up. "Are you going to read it with me?" "I'm not free." Song Ying turned around and glanced at the silent Gan Hong before quickly walking away. Was Song Ying like this before? Luocchio looked at the red wine book in his hand a few more times before suddenly asking, "When you were with her?" Gan Hong shook her head and said with some admiration, "Usually it's not like this. But there are only two people who can make Miss Ying helpless, and one of them is Master Chiu." "Another one?" Luocchio asked with interest. "Yes, Master," Gan Hong said in a low voice. Luocchio smiled knowingly and pointed to the book opposite him. "Don't just stand there. Take a look. It's quite interesting." Ganhong shook her head. It's useless for me to learn these. There's no harm in learning more. Luochio said as he read. Just think of it as killing time. Otherwise, you'll be very bored. Maybe you can go outside and relax. Then, I'll just read. Ganhong sat down. Luochio randomly picked up a book and moved it in front of Ganhong. She suddenly understood Master Chio's way of doing things. He easily created two different choices for people and then made them choose the one he wanted them to choose. Reading a book or going out for a walk. As a bodyguard, Ganhong couldn't let her master out of her sight. Of course, she could choose not to read and just stand there. But after the hints of sit down and kill time were added, her subjective consciousness was directly biased. Ganhong looked up and stole a glance at Luochio, only to see Luochio reading with great interest. Maybe she was thinking too much. One incredible person. This book is really interesting. Maybe because of Ning Jing, Ganhong, who had always been interested in guns, fighting, and other knowledge related to her profession, could easily read the content of this book. I just randomly picked it out. Isn't this something I've never seen before? Maybe it was because this book was mixed in with a bunch of professional books with a strange style. It was actually a comic book. The Droplet of God. Wait a minute, doesn't this mean that I can only read comic books? Under the night sky, the lights were bright. However, at this time, at a high place that was difficult for ordinary people to see, the space was rippling as if it was floating out of the water. At this time, two figures emerged from the ripples in the air. The first person he saw was the dazzling Wolfgang, followed by Noah, who had accompanied him. Noah was wearing a grayish-white robe with a strange purple belt. At the same time, the hood covered his face up to his nose. They landed on the shoulder of the huge god statue on Bread Mountain, looking down at the city together. Wolfgang said at this time, Noah, speaking of which, how long has it been since you came to the Lord's realm? It's been a while. Noah was silent for a while, then looked around the city of God. No matter how many different times I've traveled, the filth hidden under the beauty here has never changed. Wolfgang nodded, then looked at the huge god's head next to him with interest. He stretched out his hand and patted it a few times. Every time I see this thing, I will think of the scene I saw on the 16th Earth. Endless zombies were climbing like ants, covering him and drowning him in despair. The 16th Earth has been destroyed by the Michael Club. Now the Michael Club is rebuilding the new civilization after the wasteland of the 16th Earth. Of course, it is according to their ideas, Noah said calmly. I don't know what the Michael Club in the main world is doing. Different times have different directions. Compared to the Michael Club in the 16th Earth, the development in the main world is much more backward. Wolfgang shook his head and said, After all, it may not be the protagonist chosen by the main world to start the apocalypse, right? It's not conclusive yet. Don't judge too early. Noah waved his hand and closed his eyes. After a while, he opened his eyes again and said, There are no traces of the lost zone around here. Wolfgang, your deduction of Lucifer's disappearance may be wrong. No, Wolfgang couldn't help but be surprised, but the notes in the wind are not found. At least, I can't feel it in this country. Could it be that Lucifer has left South America? Noah pondered for a moment and suddenly said, I don't know why, but I have an uneasy feeling when I'm in this place, as if I'm being watched by something. In this dark night, I can faintly feel a strange power. What's the danger level? Wolfgang's expression changed slightly. If it was something that could make Noah say the word strange, he dared not take it lightly. I can't define it. Noah lifted his hood, revealing his furrowed brows. It's a flash in the pan, and then it disappears. Wolfgang said calmly, Could it be the spying of the will of the main world? Noah, is it because you haven't been back for so long that you can't adapt to the spying of the will of the main world? Maybe. Noah nodded, but his solemn expression did not diminish because of this. Let's be careful. I heard from the newcomer that Dong Zhuo brought back that the club has been traveling in the main world during this time. Wolfgang nodded and said, That's true, but the club shouldn't be here now. According to the news from the newcomer, the club should still be in Huan Nation now, and it has a new boss. I know. Noah nodded. I heard that he is a very interesting guy. If there's a chance this time, let's meet him. It's about time to say hello to the new boss. Hearing this, Wolfgang shook his hand with a wry smile and moved his 10 fingers. The two were silent for a long time. Noah put on his hood again, then looked at Wolfgang and said, "Take me to Charlotte. Maybe she is hiding something from us. If there are too few clues, it's hard to judge. Then let's go." Wolfgang waved his hand and pointed to a corner of the city under the night sky. After the two left quickly, ripples in the air once again surged out from the shoulder of the statue of God. Yu Yi, who had changed back into a maid costume, slowly walked out. She gently clasped her hands together and placed them on her abdomen. Book of Void, Noah, Arkansas, no matter who came, as long as they did not destroy the club's business, they were not related to the club. A smile suddenly appeared on Miss Maid's face. She stretched out her finger and gently tapped on the statue of God, then turned around and left, disappearing in an instant. Late at night, even a busy place like the hospital was almost quiet. Occasionally, there were nurses patrolling the rooms and doctors on duty walking around. Of course, the emergency department was still brightly lit. But the inpatient department was already a comfortable environment enough for the patients to sleep peacefully. Barbara had already left. She would come early in the morning to replace Mr. Orphy. Originally, Barbara intended to persuade Mr. Orphy to go home and rest because he had important work to attend tomorrow. But Mr. Orphy insisted on staying this time. In desperation, Barbara could only go home to rest and come back tomorrow to replace him. In the independent ward, Mr. Orphy was lying on the sofa and had already fallen asleep. However, his hands were still holding that brown notebook. He had already finished reading the contents inside. Suddenly, Dr. Frankie sat up on the bed. He opened his eyes and looked around blankly. He didn't know why he appeared in this place. It seemed to be a hospital. He saw a man lying on the sofa. Dr. Frankie frowned. He felt that this man gave him a very familiar feeling, but he couldn't remember the man's name. He even subconsciously thought that this man was a stranger. Dr. Frankie hesitated for a moment. He didn't intend to wake this stranger up. He quietly got out of bed, feeling very hungry. He wanted to eat something, so he casually picked up an apple from the table and gnawed on it. At the same time, he pushed open the door of the ward and walked out. He walked in the corridor of the hospital while gnawing on the apple. He wanted to find a doctor or a nurse and ask why he was in this place. But this hospital was somewhat different from the hospital in his impression. Since when was there such a clean and advanced hospital in Rio? There were even many instruments that he couldn't name. Suddenly, Dr. Frankie saw a man wearing a patient's clothes. He was secretly smoking in a corner of the overhead floor and talking. It seemed that he was talking on the phone. Dr. Frankie waited for a while. When a man finished the phone call, he walked over and patted the man's shoulder. This mysterious appearance startled the patient who was secretly smoking. But when he saw that it was also an old patient, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh, old mister, please don't scare people in the middle of the night, okay? If the nurse finds out, I'll be in trouble." Sorry, I mean no harm," Dr. Frankie said apologetically. "Can you pick up my phone? I want to call home." The man was stunned for a moment, but he still lent the phone. He wasn't afraid of what the old man could do. But when Dr. Frankie took the phone, he didn't move for a long time. He just held the phone and looked from left to right. "Old mister, hurry up. I have to go back to my room, or I'll be found out," the man urged. Dr. Frankie hesitated at this time. He felt his face was a little hot. As a university professor and a highly intellectual, he was really embarrassed to say what he was going to say next. But he had to say it. I don't seem to know how to use your phone. Is this a phone? This is the latest iPhone 9. How can not be a phone? Old mister, are you stupid?" The man was stunned. Then he thought of something. "Oh, you're the kind of person who only knows how to use the old man's phone, right? Come on, tell me the number, I'll call you." "Okay." Dr. Frankie reluctantly handed the phone back and then quickly read out a number. "This is my home phone number." The man dialed it directly, but soon frowned and said, "Old mister, this number doesn't exist." Chapter 850. "Sir, I remember that the area code with this prefix has been canceled for more than 20 years. Anyway, I have to go back to the ward. It's almost time for the nurse's inspection. You should go back as well." Dr. Frankie had been standing at the fence in front of the overhead floor for a while. He looked at the city in front of him with many high-rise buildings. The development of the city was completely different from the city in his impression. Overall, it showed a higher degree of development. In his impression, the area in front of him should be very barren. Cancelled for more than 20 years? Impossible. Impossible. He muttered to himself as he gradually fell into a state of confusion. He suddenly felt that the world had become so strange that he was completely in a state of uneasiness. Dr. Frankie abruptly turned around and walked towards the ward he came out of. The middle-aged man sleeping in the ward should be able to give him the answer he wanted. At this time, he shouldn't care that the other party was a stranger. Dr. Frankie quickly found the original ward and pushed the door in. But he didn't find the sleeping man he found when he woke up. He just saw a suit jacket fell onto the sofa. If he remembered correctly, this jacket was on the man's body when he fell asleep. Dr. Frankie slowly sat down. He subconsciously took the cushion next to him and hugged it. It seemed to give him a little sense of security. But subconsciously, Dr. Frankie always felt that he needed to do something very important, but he didn't have a specific memory of what it was. He desperately wanted to remember what that thing was, but his brain seemed to have been implanted with a pressure pump. It was expanding crazily, causing him to hold his head in pain. His body seemed to be resisting him to remember what he needed to do. Dr. Frankie seemed to be trapped in an endless loop. He wanted to remember, but the pain was worse, so he felt that it was very important at this time. So he wanted to recall more pain, wanted to recall more, until the door was opened in a hurry. Because the door was opened in a hurry, the door lock directly hit the wall, making a bang. This sound is like a needle piercing a balloon. Dr. Frankie's mind was roaring at this time, but he immediately calmed down. He subconsciously raised his head and saw an unfamiliar middle-aged man. At this time, the middle-aged man was gasping for breath. His head was full of hair, and his face was pale. He held a notebook in his hand and stopped in front of the door. He seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Then, with a somewhat unfriendly expression, he quickly walked in and said angrily, "How could you walk off to who knows where without saying a word?" Dr. Frankie opened his mouth and said hesitantly, "Who are you?" "Patter." The sound of the notebook falling from his hand. At this moment, Mr. Orphe's anger had completely disappeared. He looked at the confused Dr. Frankie in disbelief. The doctor was sending Dr. Frankie's body into a sophisticated instrument for examination. As the president of this hospital, he should be resting at home in the middle of the night. However, he was still dragged out of his home. In fact, there was no special reason, but compared to Mr. Orphe, a president like him could only accept his fate. The examination had been done for more than 2 hours. Mr. Orphe had been standing behind the doctor silently all the time. This made the doctor feel an unprecedented great pressure, as if the invigilator was standing behind him in an important exam. Finally, the conveyor bed of the instrument sent Dr. Frankie out. The doctor pressed the button and called 2 medical staff. "Okay, bring the patient out." In fact, Dr. Frankie had already fallen into a coma. Halfway through the examination, Dr. Frankie had already fainted. At this time, the doctor looked at the image of Dr. Frankie's body on the screen, sweating profusely. He was speechless for a while. Mr. Orphe didn't wait long before frowning. "Any result?" The doctor gulped and said hesitantly, "I've never seen such a strange situation. The patient's body index is so low that it makes one's hair stand on end. To be honest, he's on the verge of death." At this point, the doctor sneaked a peek at Mr. Orphe. Seeing that the country's minister's face was so gloomy that it made one's heart turn cold, the doctor had no choice but to continue. But the patient's brain is very active. The value is 10 times that of a normal person. It's like, say it," Mr. Orphe said in a low voice. The doctor gritted his teeth. It's like his brain is mobilizing all the body energy to support this change and maintain this super high activity. Can it be stopped? Mr. Orphe found the key to the problem. The doctor sweated profusely. According to the current situation, even if he falls into a coma, this state can't be stopped. It will only continue. I didn't find any symptoms similar to cancer in the brain sketch. This seems to be a natural change of the body. But how can the human body produce such a change? We know the brain has a protective mechanism. When it's too dangerous, the brain will even cut off some things. For example, when the pain exceeds the limit, the brain will automatically enter a state of shutdown. I said, "Can it be stopped?" Mr. Orphy pressed on the control panel and stared at the gray-haired doctor. "I can't think of a solution for now." The doctor had to be conservative, but I could find a few brain experts to study it together. But it will take time. Didn't you say his condition is very dangerous? You still have time for a meeting? Mr. Orphy's eyes twitched. The doctor had to say in a hurry, "Although we can't stop this crazy life extraction temporarily, we can't stop it. I can use medicine to supplement the patient's consumption. It should be able to maintain it for a while." Mr. Orphy was anxious, but he didn't lose his mind. However, his gaze became more and more frightening. "Hurry. Who do you need to find? Tell me, and I'll send it over." This hospital doctor didn't doubt such a promise. Even if it was someone sentenced to death, he could probably dig him out from the prison. This was Mr. Orphy, but the sun hadn't risen yet. He was so sleepy. Caroline was woken up by the bell outside the dormitory. This seemed to be a design by the hospital to prevent students from sleeping in and learning. Of course, for people like Caroline who had nothing to do with learning, such a harsh bell was simply an inhuman design. Caroline yawned and got up. She found that she had slept on the sofa for the whole night. Caroline glanced at the blanket draped over her, then looked around in confusion. She found that Arnold was still sitting at the desk at this time, and the desk lamp was still on. It seemed that he had been reading all night. Caroline sneered subconsciously with Arnold on her back. She already knew the true identity of Arnold, and she suddenly felt that this guy really spared no effort in acting as Arnold. "You didn't stay up all night reading, right?" Caroline rubbed her face and tried to look surprised. Hearing this, Arnold put down the pen in his hand, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and then glanced at the electronic clock next to him. "Is it already this time?" He turned the chair and looked at Caroline. Caroline looked at the fatigue on Arnold. It was obvious that he hadn't slept all night, but she didn't know what he did in the middle. While muttering in her heart, Caroline said, "Why don't you take a rest?" "No need. The exam time is almost up." Arnold shook his head. "I'll take a shower and go out. Then I'll make you a cup of coffee." Caroline nodded. "Thank you." Arnold smiled slightly and walked straight into the bathroom without saying anything. Taking advantage of this, Caroline walked to the desk and took a look. She found that the books inside were densely written. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. This prop was quite well prepared. Of course, she couldn't understand the content inside. She threw it aside and began to focus on making coffee. Arnold had already put on a full set of acting skills, so I can't neglect it. What was that saying again? Life was like a play, and it all depended on acting skills. Arnold quickly walked out of the bathroom and had changed into a new set of clothes. But what made Carell want to complain was that this guy's clothes were basically the same. 3 white, 3 black, and 1 blue. As for the pants, they were the same color. "By the way, this is for you." Arnold walked straight to the table, picked up his school bag, and took out a box from it. The phone box. Inside was a brand new mobile phone. Caroline picked up the phone in surprise and asked curiously, "Is this for me?" Arnold nodded and said, "It's not a good brand. I found it on the internet. But it's not a problem to play some games to pass the time. As for the card, it's a brand new space card. Although you are temporarily safe hiding here, you can't always stay out of contact with the outside world." With that said, Arnold used the new phone to make the first call. Arnold's mobile phone rang. "This is my phone." Arnold smiled and said, "If there's anything, just call me. Then I'm going out." "Oh, then be careful," Caroline said subconsciously. Angry Birds. When she was bored, Caroline's favorite game was this super popular game that could pass the time. There was once a man with particularly strong endurance who plowed her for 2 hours. Most of the time, because she was too lazy to move and really didn't feel anything, Caroline was playing this game all the time. Of course, Caroline couldn't remember what that man was thinking. Probably in despair or something like that. Click. The door of room 403 suddenly opened gently at this time. Caroline quickly put down the phone and looked over, saying subconsciously, "Back so soon? 403?" Caroline's eyes widened because the person who came back at this time was obviously not Arnold, but 403 who had secretly saved her once. This time, he wore a simple human skin headgear. He looked like a certain Mr. President who had resigned, the one known as A.O. Guanhai. Although she didn't have the energy to complain in her heart, it was much more pleasing to the eye than that bandaged appearance. Caroline stood up and went to the door nervously. She closed the door and walked in while holding 403's hand. "Why are you here? What if you are discovered?" "If I'm not sure, I won't come up," 403 said indifferently. His voice was still hoarse. Caroline thought so and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. 403 sat down at this time and said, "Well, now let's exchange information. Is there anything special?" Caroline said, "Nothing. I was tired last night and fell asleep." Caroline said briefly and then asked, "What about you? Is there anything special after the ball yesterday?" She remembered that she accidentally bumped into Lucas' girlfriend walking intimately with another man. Would 403, who was hiding in the dark, feel particularly uncomfortable after seeing his girlfriend? "Nothing, I left," 403 said indifferently. "After all, my appearance is not suitable to stay outside for too long." "Is that so?" Caroline nodded and suddenly said, "There is nothing special except that the guy gave me a mobile phone." "Mobile phone?" 403 tilted his head. "Here, this one." Caroline handed over the phone. 403 quickly took the phone apart. He seemed to be very familiar with electronic equipment. But thinking about 403's identity, Caroline did not say anything. After all, Arnaud himself was a top student, and it seemed that he had a degree in mechanical engineering. Lucas, 403, was Arnaud's former roommate, so his grades were probably not bad, right? Sure enough. Soon after, 403's fingers pinched a small chip. "What is this?" "A tracker." 403 put this small chip back into the mobile phone at this time and restored everything. Caroline was unhappy and said a little angrily, "Why did you put it back?" 403 said, "If you don't put it back, won't he know that you found it? This will put you in a bad situation. Moreover, putting it back is not just to prevent him from suspecting you. More importantly, we can make good use of this tracker." With that said, 403 quickly stood up. "Well, I have a good idea. You continue to stay here. I need to prepare something. By the way, you must carry the taser I gave you with you, just in case." "Got it. I have already hidden it close to me." Caroline shrugged. Chapter 851. The normal exam did not take up much of Arnold's energy because he had done a lot of preparation before the exam. He even finished the content of the exam paper early, but he did not leave the examination hall early. Instead, he left with the other candidates. According to the original plan, after the exam, Arnold would exchange identities with Haley. Even after interrogating Haley last night, Arnold still maintained this idea because he needed more time to monitor the development of the entire group led by Boston. However, he changed his mind at the last minute. There were too many uncertainties. In addition, considering Haley's current mental state, Arnold could not guarantee that Haley would not suddenly lose control. Moreover, Haley's palm was injured, so it was not easy to force an explanation. Therefore, Arnold planned to postpone the identity exchange for the time being. Originally, there were 2 other exams in the next few days, so Arnold simply planned to pass the next few days like this. At the same time, it was convenient for him to directly supervise Caroline. Not only did he install a tracker on a mobile phone he gave to Caroline, but he also installed listening software. Therefore, as soon as he left the examination hall, Arnold picked up the mobile phone to see if Caroline had contacted the outside world during this period. However, to Arnold's disappointment, Caroline obviously did not contact anyone, not even a phone call. However, Arnold was very patient, so he wasn't in a hurry. Being slow meant that he had more time to deploy, and he could gradually eliminate the uncontrollable factors. "Caroline, I've finished the exam." Arnold contacted Caroline directly at this time. "I'll be back soon. Are you hungry? What do you want to eat? I'll bring something back for you." "Okay, wait for me for a while." Arnold quickly walked down the stairs of the teaching building and walked into the crowd. At this time, a girl in the crowd who had also come out of the examination hall saw him. She seemed to have thought of something and hurried over. She seemed to want to stop Anua, but Anua quickly walked into the crowd and disappeared after a few glances. Shauna, what happened? Soon, another man walked to the girl's side, intimately put his arm around the girl's waist, and asked with concern. The girl named Shauna shook her head and said casually, "It's nothing. I saw an acquaintance that I rarely see, so I wanted to ask him something, but I won't be able to see him in a while." The man didn't mind. He just nodded and considered where to eat with the girl next. Sean listened to the man's suggestion, and a smile gradually appeared on her face. The two slowly left. If Caroline was here, she would have found this girl named Sean. She had already seen her once, because Sean was the girl in that photo who was very close to Lucas. Caroline was still playing the birdie game in room 403, waiting for Arnold to come back. But before Arnold came back, there was a quick knock on the door. This made Caroline suddenly nervous. If it was Arnold, he would naturally open the door and come in directly. But Caroline soon relaxed because the guy who knocked on the door left after passing a note through the crack in the door. After glancing at the contents of the note, Caroline confirmed the identity of the mysterious person who left 403. But when Caroline saw the contents of the note, she fell into a dilemma. Because what 403 wrote on the note asked her to do next, Caroline felt a slight pain in her balls. Falling in love. Falling in love? Caroline was taken aback. Does this mean that I have to use a honey trap or something? Caroline didn't resist selling her body. The key was that in the 19 years of her life, she didn't know what love was. Love was not sex. If it was sex, she guaranteed that she would be a master. But if it was love, she could only be regarded as a rookie and a fighter among rookies. Caroline rolled her eyes, tore the note into pieces, and flushed it away with the toilet like washing away dog feces. She raised her middle finger at the whirlpool in the toilet. At this time, the door of the dormitory opened normally. Caroline heard the sound and walked out in a hurry. She saw Arnold walking back with a bag of food. She suddenly walked up to Arnold, then put one hand on Arnold's shoulder, tilted her head, and said, "Hey, buddy, do you want to go on a date with me?" "Huh?" Arnold showed a very puzzled look. Caroline laughed and said, "Actually, it's because I'm too idle, so I want to go out for a walk, just like the masquerade party you took me to yesterday. Didn't you say it was quite safe yesterday?" Arnold secretly cursed Haley in his heart. Going out was equivalent to an increase in the variable factor. How could it be more stable than just staying in the dormitory? But considering that Caroline could also sneak out quietly when he went out, wait, why did she suddenly ask to go out? Is there any action? The truth of the bank card? Arnold pondered for a moment and nodded. "Okay, where do you want to go?" Caroline rolled her eyes and said, "Please, since it's a date, of course, you as the man should decide where to go. Anyway, the final stop is the Clock Hotel or something like that, right? Dating equals having sex." This was basically Caroline's understanding. Arnold had a look at the time, then nodded and agreed. "Well, we have time in the afternoon. Let's go out after eating." But in fact, the places arranged by Arnold were basically places where couples in the university often went. It was not that the atmosphere in these places was bad, but Caroline always felt that these dating places were a bit textbook. This guy, don't tell me he doesn't know how to pick up girls? Caroline looked at this guy. He needed her kind reminder to know that he should buy some water back or something. Was this guy really a gigolo? How did this guy get hold of Levy Adam in the first place? By the way, they were now in a lobby of the university. This was a place to tell the history of the university, recording many famous people and outstanding achievements since the establishment of the university. Arnold was watching with great interest, but Caroline felt unusually bored, but she had to force a smile. Maybe it was because she was playing the role of a nerd, so Arnold looked like a nerd? These two brothers were really amazing. Whether it was the fact that Arnold was secretly controlling a criminal gang from 403 or Haley's acting skills as Arnold, Caroline felt that the world owed these two brothers an Oscar. Huh, what's this? Caroline's eyes suddenly stopped on an exhibition stage. Why did you stop? Arnold saw Caroline suddenly stop at this time and walked over. Feeling bored. "Oh, no, I'm just a little curious about who this old man is. Carlo pointed to the things on the exhibition stage. Many photos, trophies, and a bronze upper body statue. Arnold pushed up his glasses, glanced at it, and said, "This is Dr. Frankie, a very outstanding scientist in our country. In the past, he was a professor in this school. Later, his ability was too outstanding. So he was invited to the National Institute of Science and Technology, but he kept his title in the school. Later, I heard that there was a major accident, which made Dr. Frankie depressed for a long time. Well, it seems that recently I heard that he is coming back to be the honorary dean, but I haven't seen him." Caroline thought to herself, "You're a freaking cowherd who doesn't attend classes. It would be strange if I could see him." However, it turned out that the old man I met at the artificial lake that day had such a big background. I've seen a real celebrity. So, Arnold suddenly looked at Caroline. Caroline was taken aback and asked curiously, So what?" Arnold said, "Do you feel bored?" Arnaud had been secretly observing Caroline's actions and found that she didn't do anything strange, nor did she leave anything suspicious during the whole process. Could it be that he was overthinking it? She was just trapped for too long and simply wanted to come out for a walk to relax? Caroline shook her head. "It's not boring. Instead, it's quite interesting. Looking at these people, I feel like I'm looking at another world, a world that's completely different from mine." Caroline's words were filled with emotion. In this city's top university, no matter where, it revealed that she was out of place. The vitality they had was something Caroline was both afraid and envious of. "Do you want to change?" Arnold suddenly asked. Caroline opened her mouth and suddenly found that she didn't know how to answer such a question. In her impression, no one had asked her such a question. She wanted to say something several times, but hesitated. Finally, she shook her head and gave the answer. "I don't know. Maybe it's impossible to change. Maybe it's just that you don't dare to take the first step." Arnold also shook his head. Caroline fell into a daze and didn't have the mood for the next thing. So she said, "I'm tired. Let's go back." 10 hours had passed since Dr. Frankie's body had undergone a precise examination. The hospital set up a group of experts and had a long and difficult discussion on Dr. Frankie's illness. Mr. Orphy participated in the whole process. It was because of the presence of this national bigwig that these experts of the seminar tried their best. They worked even harder than when they took the doctor's license. At the seminar, the experts struggled until their faces turned red, but they couldn't come up with a feasible plan that could convince everyone. "I'll leave for a while." Mr. Orphy couldn't stand it anymore. He was so anxious that he didn't want to continue wasting time on this discussion. He walked to the corridor outside the conference room and sat down with a tired face. Dr. Frankie, his father, his life was fading away with every passing second. For relatives, this was a long and torturous mental torture. "Sir, you're here. Barbara, you're here." This Filipino maid who had been taking care of his family was very responsible. At this time, she brought some food for Mr. Orphy in a thermos flask. "Sir, Louis will be on holiday tomorrow. What do you think?" Barbara sat down. Mr. Orphy frowned and finally shook his head in silence. "Just say he's on a business trip. Don't come over these 2 days. Stay at home and take care of Louis." "Okay." Barbara still wanted to say something, but there was a rush of footsteps at this time. It was a young man in a suit, about 27 or 28 years old. The young man called Mr. Orphy from afar. Barbara recognized this young man. She remembered that he seemed to be Mr. Orphy's secretary at work. She had seen him several times, so Barbara sensibly stood up, said goodbye, and went back to the ward to take care of Dr. Frankie. "What's the matter?" Mr. Orphy glanced at his secretary. Even after the incident with Dr. Frankie, Mr. Orphy didn't ask for leave. It was not that he didn't want to, but in his position, there was basically no such thing as a vacation. He even needed the permission of the president to take a break, and it was very troublesome to apply for it. Without any other choice, he could only arrange his daily work through the mobile phone and the like. He also handed over some things that could be followed up by his subordinates. The secretary sat down at this time and said with concern, "Nothing special. I just came to see the situation of Sir and the doctor. Everyone is very concerned about them." "Thank you." Mr. Orphy forced a smile and then sighed. I can hold on. Have those experts reached a conclusion? The secretary asked curiously. Mr. Orphy shook his head. The secretary sighed directly at this time and said helplessly, if only there were miracles in this world. The doctor has contributed so much in his life. Why didn't he get the favor of God? Mr. Orphy shook his head with a wry smile. There are no miracles in this world. We are people who believe in science. The secretary smiled awkwardly at this time. The Ministry of State Security was a department that advocated high-tech, but he suddenly remembered a report 2 days ago and couldn't help saying, that's not necessarily true. Someone really saw miracles a few days ago. Mr. Orphy cast a puzzled look. Of course, he was not interested in miracles, but simply wanted to know something else to distract himself from his serious mood at this time. The secretary probably knew what Mr. Orphy was thinking, so he said, speaking of which, there was a memorial service in the theater that day. I heard that another guy who claimed to be a messenger of God brought a rich businessman who was shot in the chest back to life. Oh, by the way, here's a video taken by a passerby, but it's a bit blurry. Chapter 852. Although the camera was shaky, the quality was very high. After getting used to the shaky camera, one could still see clearly what was happening in the video. He stood up. The man really stood up. Oh my God, was he really shot? What did I see? He flew up. He flew up. God. Of course, there was also the voice of the person who shot the video. Mr. Orphy frowned the whole time. Decades of worldview told him that the content of the video was fake. He was looking for a flaw in the video, until finally, the masked emissary of God suddenly soared into the sky and disappeared. Mr. Orphy pressed the stop button. At first, he was still trying to find a loophole in the video, but when he saw the emissary of God flying into the sky, Mr. Orphy concluded that it was a prank video. It was very likely that special effects had been added to the video and it had been edited. Cash's film technology was so advanced that it was not difficult to make such a video. Seeing that his superior was not in the mood to watch the video, the secretary took back his mobile phone. Mr. Orphy suddenly asked, have you found out the origin of this video? Actually, Mr. Orphy didn't need to worry about this kind of thing. The National Security Department naturally wouldn't care about this kind of trivial matter. But Mr. Orphy urgently needed something to divert his attention, so he asked directly, oh, he is the son of a factory owner, one of the hostages of the theater robbery. The secretary said seriously, Superior, didn't you ask us to thoroughly investigate everyone on that day? We found this video in the process. Besides, the man who was shot in the video is a rich businessman named Bison. Mr. Orphy frowned. He keenly sensed that something was not right. It was rather strange, but he could not figure out what it was. So he asked directly, what do you think? The secretary sorted out his thoughts. Rising up and flying up into the sky are generally scenes in science fiction. This guy probably wants to upload this video to the website. But if it's just to make money, with Bison's wealth, he doesn't need to do this kind of thing. Bison doesn't lack fame and wealth. Yes, that's the strange part. Mr. Orphy nodded. This was exactly what he felt was illogical. He suddenly looked at his secretary. This matter isn't that simple. The secretary nodded. According to the information of the investigators, Mr. Orphy has been very suspicious. From that day onwards, Mr. Besson had been anxiously inviting a lot of people to his private villa to hold some mysterious ceremonies. In recent days, more and more people have joined, and they're all rich businessmen and celebrities. Then, the secretary showed Mr. Orphy another set of photos on the phone. Sir, these were secretly taken by our people. In the photo, almost all of them were wearing strange black robes and seemed to be performing some kind of ritual. Among these people, there was also a man wearing a carnival mask who seemed out of place. This is the messenger of God in the video. Mr. Orphy frowned. The secretary nodded. According to the figure, it is the same person. Mr. Orphy was silent. After a while, he asked, what do you think? The secretary said, according to the clues we have so far, I suspect this is a new religious organization. Of course, for now, this organization hasn't done anything illegal. Mr. Orphy said in a low voice, Since they are all rich businessmen, I'm afraid this religious organization is suspected of illegally accumulating wealth. Well, you could talk to the local police station and let them follow up. If this religious organization was simply a scam, the Ministry of State Security would not have to deal with this matter. This was just something that the Ministry of State Security had unintentionally uncovered during the investigation of the hostage case, and it could be easily dealt with by another violent organization that the public was more familiar with. During the conversation, the experts in the conference room came out one by one. Mr. Orphy looked at the dejected faces of these medical authorities. He already had the worst guess in his heart, and his face didn't look good. Mr. Orphy, I'm sorry. I'm afraid we can't come up with a feasible and effective treatment plan in a short time. The attending doctor said helplessly, it's the first time we've encountered this kind of case. We can't find any reference material. Mr. Orphy waved his hand and said in a low voice, I don't want to hear this. Just tell me, what do you plan to do now? The experts looked at each other. In the end, the doctor in charge braced himself and said, I think we can maintain the patient's life as much as possible. After all the test results are out, we may be able to find some clues. In addition, there are many excellent brain experts abroad. We will try to contact them. Don't worry, we will do our best to treat the patient. Okay, Mr. Orphy nodded. At least we didn't hear the worst. You can go back to your work. After sending the experts away, Mr. Orphy fell silent. He frowned as if he was making a difficult decision. In the end, Mr. Orphy gritted his teeth and looked at his secretary, sent an application to the office of the president. I want to take a long vacation. After making this decision, for some reason, Mr. Orphy suddenly felt like he had stopped, as if he had suddenly stopped in the middle of an endless marathon. After this, Mr. Orphy planned to stay in the hospital permanently. However, to his surprise, several guests came to the Research Institute in the evening. The leader was the director of the Research Institute, whom he was familiar with. As for the others, they were all senior national talents in the existing Research Institute. Orphy, how's Frankie doing? The dean asked Dr. Frankie out of concern. Not very good. Mr. Orphy told the truth. The director was a little hesitant at this time. Looking at the several old pedants who came with him, he wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Mr. Orphy frowned. Why are you here? The director gritted his teeth and said seriously, you may feel unhappy if I say this, but we need Francis very much. I don't know what happened to him, but I'm sure of one thing. The things he wrote for us can make an unprecedented breakthrough in our aerospace technology. It even shows me the possibility of catching up with the big countries. Yes, that's incredible. An old scientist who came with him said excitedly. Francis actually completed a challenge that might take a whole generation to overcome. He's the greatest genius in our country. So what do you mean? Mr. Orphy suddenly felt disgusted. It was because of his spirit of sacrifice for science that he had suffered the pain of having his family destroyed once. Are you going to drag my father back? You want to take a patient who is lying on a sickbed and can't be guaranteed to survive to a high-intensity workplace for your so-called major breakthrough? That's not what we mean. The director hurriedly comforted Mr. Orphy and said seriously, we're also concerned about Francis's health. We're not as relaxed as you are. Orphy, please understand that we need him very much. Therefore, when Frankie recovers, I hope that you can stop stopping him and let him come back. We need him. As he spoke, the dean and the other elders beside him began to plead with Mr. Orphy. Don't bother me. Mr. Orphy directly drove the director and the others away, and then slammed the door of the ward. Soon after, the sound of footsteps came from outside the door. It was the sound of the director and the others leaving. Mr. Orphy took a deep breath and then walked to the glass window, looking at Dr. Francis, who was in the ICU with various equipment connectors all over his body. He reached out and touched his father, who he couldn't touch at all through the glass window, and said with a bitter smile, I know, they need you, no lie. That kind of shining gaze. You and Maggie both had it, I know. Mr. Orphy closed his eyes and murmured, I know. It's time to eat, Haley. Boston knocked on the door and then sent the lunchbox in through a small window under the door. This room was specially made and was usually used to lock up those disobedient guys. Of course, it was also used to imprison hostages at some time. Of course, since they met Arnold, Boston and the others hadn't done such a time-consuming and profitable job like kidnapping for ransom for a long time. When can I go out? Didn't you say I'll change back today? Haley said anxiously from inside the room. Boston just sneered and didn't even answer, and then closed the window under the door. Just as he turned around, he heard the sound of things being thrown from inside. Boston sneered and ignored it. You stay here, I'll go out for a while. Boston walked to a guy who was taking drugs, lifted his leg, and said with a frown, Take less. The little brother made an okay gesture, but he shook his head. Poston furrowed his brows and decided not to pay any attention to him. He left this place, but before going out, he locked this place from the inside. He even hung a chain on the door. When Arnold was here, he was very strict and asked them to be very, very careful in everything, but sometimes Boston felt that this was too cowardly. Of course, cowardly was cowardly, but since he started following Arnold, his gang was getting richer day by day. Then came the problem. They were earning more and more money, but they couldn't spend it or have fun. What was the difference between this and a salted fish? So after leaving this person behind, Boston naturally planned to go out and have some fun. Hello, is this Arnold? Oh, nothing. I'm just reporting to you about Haley. Nothing, it's just that he's not in a good mood. Don't worry, I've been watching him, I won't go away. Don't worry. While calling Arnold, Boston quietly walked down the stairs. In the darkness, after seeing Boston leave, a figure walked out of the darkness, and then slowly climbed up the stairs from where he came out, and finally came to the door of the house with a chain hanging on it. This guy who quietly came up the door was wearing a dark brown hood, and after lifting it, his head was covered in bandages. His eyes were filled with terrifying blood vessels. He was 403. 403 put his ear on the door, and after listening for a while, a string of tools for unlocking came out. His skills were not excellent, and it took him some time to open the chain and lock on the door. She gently opened the door to room 403 and heard the sound of music coming from the room. The guy who was taking drugs was lying on the sofa with a weird smile on his face. He looked like a drunkard who was delirious. 403 quietly walked in front of this guy, looked at some of the unfinished meatballs on the table, picked them up with one hand, and directly stuffed them into this guy's mouth. The guy who was taking drugs became even more high. He couldn't find anything at all and didn't even know where he was. He was completely immersed in a psychedelic world. 403 turned off the noisy music in the room and then came to the door of the room where Haley was imprisoned and knocked a few times with a little force. After that, 403 directly sent an envelope into the room through the small window under the door. At this time, Haley, who was in the room, heard the noise. He, who was sitting in the corner and looking at the mess on the floor, suddenly got up. He naturally noticed that the music had stopped all of a sudden. Who is it? Haley had an intuition that something had happened outside. At this moment, when he saw the envelope that was sent in from under the door, he quickly asked, Who is it? Who is outside? But Haley didn't get any response. Haley frowned and picked up the envelope on the floor. There were several photos inside. One was a photo of a woman and a man eating in a restaurant. The woman even gave the man a strawberry with a fork, and both of them were talking and laughing. Another photo was a photo of a woman and a man walking slowly in the shade of a tree. Another photo was a photo of a man holding 2 ice creams, walking toward the woman. The woman was Caroline, but the man was not Haley. Who is it? Who is outside? What does this mean? Who is it? Who is outside? Haley suddenly seemed to be touched by something. He suddenly fell to the ground and looked outside through the small window under the door, but he only had time to see a pair of feet leaving, closing the door outside. Chapter 853. Let me go. Who the hell are you? Let me go. You're illegally imprisoning me. It's a crime. Let me go. Through the glass, Zhang Tai could see that some medics were pressing down Dr. Frankie's hands and feet with difficulty. Of course, it was not because these medics couldn't control Dr. Frankie, but because they were afraid of hurting Dr. Frankie. Therefore, it was very difficult for them to suppress Dr. Frankie. This was already the 3rd day after the first meeting of the expert group. Mr. Orphe's face was full of stubble, and he hadn't left the hospital during this period. His red eyes and dark circles made Mr. Orphe's image look terrible. Mr. Orphe, Dr. Frankie's memory regressed again, but his brain activity is more active than yesterday. The attending doctor looked at the report in his hand. Mr. Orphe said faintly, his memory should be when he was about 26 years old. The attending doctor was stunned, and then hurriedly flipped through the various reports in his hand. When he was about 26 years old? Mr. Orphe sighed. He just said that he would accompany me to watch Boz's championship match. This is the match he promised to take me to watch when I was 8 years old. It's a birthday present. In order to find out the cause of Dr. Franch's disease in more detail, Mr. Orphe had already revealed Dr. Franch's Alzheimer's disease. By various means, he had found the doctor who secretly treated Dr. Franch's disease and obtained Dr. Franch's medical records for the past 2 years. However, these records still couldn't explain Dr. Frankie's brain activity at this time. Because the brain crazily extracted nutrients from a body, Dr. Frankie woke up for a very short time each day, but every time he woke up, his memory regressed. He's getting younger and younger. When they thought of this, some of the doctors in the expert group could not help but come up with a hypothesis. Would Dr. Frankie's memory eventually regress to the time when he was a baby and become an ignorant baby in the end? Perhaps, when his memory regressed to the time when he was a baby, it would be the end of his life. Let me go. Let me go. The medical staff was injecting tranquilizers into Dr. Frankie, which could slightly suppress the activity of his brain. However, when he woke up, his activity would further increase. This could only be a method of drinking poison to quench thirst. Seeing Dr. Frankie's half-closed eyes, Mr. Orphe suddenly quivered. Stop. Stop them. Mr. Orphe, if we stop now, we won't be able to inject the doctor with nutrient supply. His body won't be able to take it anymore. I said stop. Mr. Orphe grabbed the collar of the attending doctor with one hand. The fierce aura he had accumulated over the years suppressed the attending doctor so much that he could not even breathe properly. He could only quickly shout for the medical staff to stop. At this moment, Mr. Orphe directly broke into the intensive care unit. He untied the restraints on Dr. Frankie's hands and feet. Looking at Dr. Frankie, who was half awake due to the crazy consumption of energy, Mr. Orphe reached out and took a bottle of synthetic nutrient solution from the side. Listen, you want to leave, don't you? You want to take your son to Boz's game, don't you? Mr. Orphe glared at Dr. Frankie. If you want to go out, I can take you out. But you have to eat up all these food for me. If you agree, nod your head. Dr. Frankie nodded with difficulty. Mr. Orphe carefully fed the nutrient solution into Dr. Frankie's mouth and let him drink it. These nutrient solutions actually contain sleeping ingredients. After Dr. Frankie took it, he quickly fell into a state of drowsiness. The attending doctor wiped his sweat and walked in at this moment. He sighed and said he finally ate it. However, the known nutrient supply is almost unable to keep up with Dr. Frankie's consumption. Mr. Orphe, perhaps we should consider a backup plan. Every time, he would use a more advanced nutrient supply, and Dr. Frankie's body would quickly adapt to the external energy replenishment. Soon, the nutrient supply that could be produced with current technology would not be able to keep up with Dr. Frankie's consumption. At that time, if a solution could not be found, therefore, the expert group proposed a final solution. That was to freeze Dr. Frankie's body. In a situation where the current technology could not solve the problem, the only choice was to freeze Dr. Frankie and wait for the day when the technology would make a breakthrough in the future. At this time, Mr. Orphe carried Dr. Frankie up and seemed to be planning to leave the intensive care unit. The attending doctor was shocked. Mr. Orphe, what are you doing? Mr. Orphe took a deep breath and said, help me contact the Frozen Man Company in Europe. Has he made a decision in his heart? The attending doctor stared blankly as Mr. Orphe carried Dr. Frankie away. At the last moment, he subconsciously shouted, where are you taking him? To watch the game. The car was driving fast on the road. Behind it, there were several cars of the same model, and behind them, there was also a white ambulance. In the car at the front, Mr. Orphe, who was driving, glanced at the box in front of him. It was filled with high-concentration nutrient supply brought out from the hospital. Oh, I don't like this taste. Do you have orange-flavored ones? In the passenger seat, Dr. Frankie frowned and wanted to spit out the meatball that he had just eaten. However, Mr. Orphy reached out and covered Dr. Frankie's mouth. You need to swallow it. Otherwise, I won't take you to the court. Okay, Nagy Matthew. Dr. Frankie shook his head and reluctantly gulped. It seemed that not only was his memory regressing, but his memory was also in disorder. At this time, Dr. Frankie recognized Mr. Orphy as one of his old buddies, Mr. Matthew, the curator of the Science and Technology Museum. Hey, Matthew, are there so many buildings around here? Why can't I remember? Dr. Frankie looked at the scenery outside the window with interest at this time. Mr. Orphy did not know how the world in Dr. Frankie's eyes was structured. He could only follow the meaning of Dr. Frankie's words, so he could only helplessly say, "This world is changing with each passing day. You stay in a laboratory all day, so of course you don't know the changes in the outside world." Dr. Frankie, on the other hand, laughed disdainfully. Nonsense. The changes in the world come from technology. If it weren't for the technology developed by us scientists in the laboratory all day long, how could the world change? We know better than they do. I didn't mean to deny you. Mr. Orphy shook his head. Dr. Frankie frowned at this time. Matthew, did we miss the time? Is Orphy really waiting for me at the stadium? Oh, it's all my fault. I actually forgot about this. If you hadn't reminded me, I would still be in the office grading test papers. At this time, Dr. Frankie should still be a teacher in the National University, far from being recruited to the National Scientific Research Institute. When did I remind you? Oh, yes, I reminded you. Mr. Orphy sighed. You really often forget about your family because of work. It can't be helped, can it? Our professor plans to choose an assistant, which will be very helpful to me in the future. Dr. Frankie shook his head. You don't have a family, so you won't understand. Mr. Orphy smiled bitterly. But have you ever thought about it, Orphy? He may not be happy to see you so busy. Maybe he wants you to stay at home with him more, even if it's just to play football for an afternoon. Speaking of this makes me angry. This kid's birthday wish this year was to watch a football game, and he even said that he would become a great football player when he grows up. Dr. Frankie gritted his teeth at this time. Mr. Orphy was stunned. Becoming a football player is a good dream. Isn't this the case for children? Becoming a great football player. That was a dream many years ago. Dr. Frankie shook his head and didn't speak. He just squinted his eyes and leaned back in his seat without saying a word. Mr. Orphy saw this and quickly opened the box full of nutritional pills nervously and pushed Dr. Frankie's shoulder. Frankie, don't sleep. We're almost there. Frankie, have some candy. Frankie. Matthew, don't disturb me. Dr. Frankie opened his eyes at this time, slapped Mr. Orphy hard, and scolded. I'm so sleepy. I can't sleep for a while. You just ruined my good dream. Do you know? I just dreamed that Orphy grew up and married a beautiful bride, and he was taking the wedding ring of the pledge from my hand. Bastard. You actually woke me up at this time. You'll bear the anger of all fathers in the world. I curse you to be single for life. I've already taken it from you once. Father. Is that so? I'm sorry. Mr. Orphy suddenly choked. At this time, Mr. Orphy's Bluetooth headset suddenly rang. Mr. Orphy glanced at Dr. Frankie and saw him squint his eyes again, saying that he wanted to continue the dream of Orphy, getting married. Sir, it's been arranged. But because of the lack of time, we can only ask the club that Potts was in to select a team of reserve players. Their main players are playing elsewhere at this time. After all, to recreate the game of that year is really... Mr. Orphy glanced at Dr. Frankie again and lowered his voice. Listen, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Let the players get ready. There are not many people in the football field. Mr. Orphy suddenly felt lucky. Fortunately, the club that the player he liked when he was a child played for was not famous and had always been in Serie B. If not for this, he really did not know where to find a large audience. But even so, a large number of extras had been pulled in, so that the place was not too empty, just like in the past. Oh, it's already started? Dr. Frankie opened his eyes. In fact, he was now like a patient suffering from narcolepsy. He would fall into a state of near drowsiness after taking 2 steps, but for some reason, he could always wake up. Dr. Frankie did not mention Orphy again. Originally, Mr. Orphy had arranged for a young actor to temporarily act as the childhood Orphy, but it seemed that there was no need for him at this time. The young actor was on standby, not far away, looking at a group of extras in front of him, holding up the banner and shouting with all their might. Then he pulled the corner of Orphy's secretary's clothes. "Even if I don't play, I still have to charge." The secretary stared at the little guy with a frown and secretly said, "This kid will have a rich future." He shook his head with a wry smile and then looked at Mr. Orphy, wondering what his officer and Dr. Frankie were talking about at this time. "Hey, Potts, give me some strength. Did you not eat?" Like a young man, from this old body that was about to collapse, he was now bursting with the vitality of a man in his prime. Mr. Orphy was a little worried and pulled Dr. Frankie, who wanted to rush out of the auditorium. "Frankie, old man, can you be a little more civilized?" "Oh, I'm sorry, I was too excited." Dr. Frankie sat down and then looked around. "Matthew, have you seen Orphy? He seems to have disappeared." With that, Dr. Frankie stood up anxiously again. Mr. Orphy was stunned. It seemed that his father had just remembered this matter. He hesitated for a moment and gave up the idea of asking his secretary to call the young actor. He said directly, "Have you forgotten?" Orphy went to the bathroom. "Oh, is that so?" Dr. Frankie nodded and sat down again. He shook his head and said, "In fact, I'm too angry to watch this. I'd rather stay in school and continue to mark papers or do experiments." Mr. Orphy smiled. "You don't like sports in the first place." Recalling the time when Dr. Frankie brought him to watch this match, Mr. Orphy smiled subconsciously as he recalled how he slept for the entire second half of the match in the chaotic environment. Dr. Frankie shook his head and muttered, "Orphy likes it. You'll understand when you become a father." Dr. Frankie gently punched Mr. Orphy's shoulder. "I don't understand." Mr. Orphy looked at Dr. Frankie, and a string in his heart was touched. "I don't understand you. I don't understand why you always talk about Orphy, but why do you always leave him with your back view? I don't understand that until later, you only have Wei in your heart. Is that so? You don't understand. You don't understand." Dr. Frankie muttered to himself, seeming to have remembered something. Mr. Orphy was keenly aware of Dr. Frankie's abnormality, and he suddenly felt a little excited. However, he heard Dr. Frankie suddenly shrugging. "Of course you don't understand, because you're not a father, huh?" "Yes, I'm not." Mr. Orphy sighed and looked at the players on the football field below. "Indeed, I can say that you. In fact, I've been the same all these years." "Why are you suddenly so negative?" Dr. Frankie asked curiously. Mr. Orphy turned his head and patted Dr. Frankie's leg. He smiled and shook his head. "It's nothing, I just suddenly thought of my father." "Oh, old Matthew must have brought you a lot of good memories." Dr. Frankie nodded. Mr. Orphy's body suddenly trembled. He was sure that he needed to do something, and an almost instinctive impulse made him stand up abruptly. He looked at Dr. Frankie. "You're right, they played really badly. I really should scold them." "Oh." Dr. Frankie was stunned. Mr. Orphy grabbed the guardrail with both hands at this time, and his body almost leaned out. He scolded, "Hey, boss, dogsh asterisk T, hurry up and use all your strength. You weak-legged trash. Dogsh asterisk T." It was so loud that people could hear it even from afar. The secretary who was on standby and a group of medical staff who were on standby looked at each other. The secretary was even a little relieved that there were no reporters here. Otherwise, as an important member of the country, it would be very damaging to Mr. Orphy's image in public. Dogsh asterisk T. Boss, you're a piece of dogsh asterisk T. Dr. Frankie laughed and stood up at this time. He imitated Mr. Orphy and leaned out. "Dogsh asterisk T. Dogsh asterisk T. Go to hell." Mr. Orphy suddenly exerted force and threw the inflatable baton in his hand into the field. "Dogsh asterisk T. Go to hell." Dr. Frankie excitedly imitated Mr. Orphy and threw the inflatable baton in his hand. The two suddenly burst into laughter. After that, Dr. Frankie fell asleep and couldn't be woken up. The team doctor hurried forward and sent Dr. Frankie to the ambulance for examination. The conclusion was that Dr. Frankie's body had deteriorated even more after this trip, so he needed to be sent back to the hospital immediately. Mr. Orphy nodded in silence and agreed. However, not long after, while the ambulance was still on the road, Dr. Frankie suddenly opened his eyes, scaring the medical staff next to him so much that they became flustered. But obviously, this time, Dr. Frankie's memory didn't go backward, nor did it go forward. Instead, it went back to the state of that day in the research institute. Dr. Frankie's hands were pressed on the stretcher bed. The doctor tried to calm Dr. Frankie down, but he kept struggling. His eyes were unfocused. After realizing that his hands couldn't move, he quickly stopped struggling. However, his lips began to move rapidly, and he kept chanting some complicated and profound words. No, the sedative has also lost its effect. The attending doctor suddenly became flustered. How could this be? How could this be? The dose injected is enough to make an adult elephant. Then do you still want to continue? Mr. Orphy angrily grabbed the attending doctor's arm when he saw that the attending doctor wanted to hit Dr. Frankie again. But if his brain doesn't cool down, the attending doctor said in horror, Mr. Orphy, he's going to die. From the looks of it, it'll be soon. Blood slowly flowed out of Dr. Frankie's nostrils, but he didn't seem to be aware of it. His eyes were still blank, and he was still performing verbal calculations. But if too much sedative was injected, it would still kill. Materials. Give me materials. I need materials. Give me materials. Dr. Frankie suddenly looked at Mr. Orphy. Materials? Materials? What materials? Mr. Orphy quickly asked. Materials. 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 Mr. Orphy clenched his teeth and suddenly shouted, Go to the research center. Go to the research center. He didn't know what materials were needed, but there was probably no place that had more materials than the research center of a country. When the director of the research center heard the news, he was shocked, but also seemed to realize something. When Dr. Frankie was sent to the research center, the director's face turned pale when he saw the state this old friend of his was in. Mr. Orphy's steps were very heavy. He silently followed beside the bed with his head lowered. When the director came up to ask about the situation, he just directly asked, Are the materials ready? I don't know what materials are needed. The director shook his head. But I asked people to move everything that could be moved here. Frankie, maybe it's what you want. Mr. Orphy's voice was very cold. He suddenly stopped, looked at the director, and said coldly, I won't allow you to miss anything. The dean nodded his head heavily. At this time, the researchers of the research center had already cleared out a large area. The so-called materials took up almost 2/3 of the space in the room. They even prepared all kinds of tools. Under the different gazes of everyone, Dr. Frankie went from needing people to support him at the beginning to suddenly rushing into the materials as if he was flying and began to madly search for something. Unlike last time, when he wrote a lot of advanced knowledge on the wall, Dr. Frankie just turned over the materials here. A lot of precious materials were turned over by him and scattered on the ground like garbage. Seeing this, many people frowned and seemed to feel heartache. Suddenly, Dr. Frankie seemed to have found what he was looking for, and then quickly put it on the work table. It was something that looked like a wooden board. This is a wooden board? A researcher looked at Dr. Frankie in confusion as he began to knock on the wooden board. In fact, it was indeed a wooden board that was broken off from a wooden box containing precious materials. Then, Dr. Frankie took out a ruler, a hacksaw, nails, and the most common tools and began to cut the wooden board. No one knew what Dr. Frankie wanted to do. But when Dr. Frankie cut the wooden board halfway, he suddenly stopped, as if he was thinking about something. He picked up an oil pen and began to write on the work table. Go and see what he wrote. The director frowned and ordered a researcher to go over. The researcher nodded. Under Mr. Orphy's sharp gaze, he only dared to quietly go to Dr. Frankie's side and look at the work table. At first, he frowned and seemed to be puzzled, but gradually, as Dr. Frankie wrote more and more, he began to open his mouth. In the end, the researcher even hurried back. Yes. Slow down. Don't panic. It's a design drawing. It's a design drawing. The researcher quickly said, "It seems to be the design drawing of a three-stage rocket, but I've never seen the structure. I can't calculate it. Get someone here." The director made a prompt decision. It seemed like the scene in the conference room last time. A large number of researchers began to gather here. They scanned the drawing on the work table into the computer and began to analyze its structure. They even began to make data models so that they could draw some conclusions in an instant. Mr. Orphy didn't care about the enthusiasm and exclamations of these scientists. He just looked at Dr. Frankie's back. It was still the same back view. It had always been the same back view she had given him. The attending doctor beside him became more and more anxious. He couldn't help but whisper in Mr. Orphy's ear, "Mr. Orphy, are you really not going to stop Dr. Frankie? He has been in this state for a long time. If he doesn't stop, I'm afraid there's really no way." "Didn't you guys already run out of ways?" Mr. Orphy glanced at the attending doctor. He couldn't say a word. Too little time was given to him and the group of experts behind him. They didn't have any reference cases in the past. Facing Mr. Orphy's gaze, he could only shake his head sadly. Mr. Orphy no longer paid attention to the attending doctor. Instead, he looked at Dr. Frankie's back and murmured, "So, are you satisfied?" Mr. Orphy sighed. He felt that there was no need to keep him alive. At least, he couldn't bear to see Dr. Frankie fall in front of his eyes. At least, let his greatness stay in his heart. Burdened with the lives of an entire team, including his own daughter-in-law, Mr. Orphy knew better than anyone else how tormenting this guilt was to Dr. Frankie, because he and Dr. Frankie had always lived under the same roof and had the most intimate relationship in the world. But because of this, he couldn't let Dr. Frankie go. He also couldn't let himself forgive Dr. Frankie. Maggie, was she also watching at this time? In a trance, Mr. Orphy seemed to see many figures that didn't belong here. His wife's figure, his wife Maggie's colleagues, those who lost their lives in the disaster a long time ago. Mr. Orphy knew that this was an illusion that he saw, a scene interwoven by mental torment. They were all by Dr. Frankie's side, around that workbench. What was left behind by those who had left had always been on Dr. Frankie. Their spirits, their wills. Is it these that have been supporting you all the time? Mr. Orphy murmured to himself. He seemed to see Maggie looking at him. He smiled and made a gesture of silence. Then he looked at Dr. Frankie attentively, as if to say, "Look, this is our pride." Mr. Orphy wanted to say something, but he stopped abruptly. He closed his eyes and tried to remember this scene that was interwoven by reality and illusion. That's it. Mr. Orphy gave his blessing to Dr. Frankie. He suddenly wanted to knock on the empty office of the Research Institute, the office that belonged to his wife Maggie. He remembered that there seemed to be a family photo on the table in that office. Perhaps it was time to take this relic back. Hey, this model, why doesn't it match the design? Let me see. Strange. Isn't the structure of this rocket model too old? Where have I seen this before? M901 satellite. This is the model of the rocket thruster used in the M901 satellite plan. I remember now. Amidst the chaos, Mr. Orphy suddenly stopped and turned around to look at the back of the old man who was carefully assembling an old model. This model, what is the doctor doing? While pushing the design of the latest rocket model, he is also making the oldest model. It doesn't match at all? Mr. Orph walked towards Dr. Frankie step by step. His back was getting closer and closer to Dr. Frankie. It was much closer than when Dr. Frankie watched Dr. Frankie's back when Dr. Frankie woke up and watched Dr. Frankie's back when Dr. Frankie was hiding outside the study. Well, I remember now. This rocket was Frankie's entry in the science and technology competition that year. Because of the structure of this rocket, he won the championship. Since then, the Research Institute discovered him when he was still teaching at the university. Well, it is indeed this model. The director of the Research Institute recalled the memory from a long time ago, but he was very puzzled by Dr. Frankie's assembly of this model. But Mr. Orphy had already come to the workbench. "Orphy, what do you want for your birthday this year?" "Rocket, I want a rocket. I want to go to space. I want to be an astronaut." "Orphy, we can't find such a thing in our country. How about something else? A new football?" I don't care. I want to be an astronaut. I want to sit on a rocket. Okay, okay, okay. Dad will make one for you. Orphe, look what I made for you. Thump, 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 the rocket is coming. I don't want it. This rocket can't fly into the sky. Well, it takes a long time to make a big rocket. Take this first, and later, Dad will make a real rocket for you. One that can send people and satellites, okay? Really? I won't lie to you. It's a deal. It's a deal. It's a deal. Mr. Orphe slowly put his hand on the back of Dr. Frankie's hand and firmly grasped it. It's a deal. Dr. Frankie's body slightly trembled, but he quickly continued to assemble the model on the workbench. Everything, everything. All for you. Chapter 854. When a model component in Dr. Frankie's hand suddenly slipped from his hand, everything seemed to be still. It was as if everything had suddenly turned into gray, a gray without any temperature. It was also like the moment after an explosion where all sound were drowned out. Dr. Frankie slowly fell to the ground, as if weightless. The world slowed down, and his body staggered before finally lying on the ground. The impact made his cheeks tremble. Mr. Orphe reached out his hand at this time, but he couldn't catch it. Dad! Doctor! The crowd's shouts came like a tide, and everything became dazzling again. The lights in the research room were as white as day, bright and beautiful, just like the sun. Dr. Frankie looked at the light above his head, and a circle of brilliance appeared in his pupils. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He slowly closed his eyes. They didn't want Dr. Frankie's life to end, and they wanted to try to save Dr. Frankie at the last moment. The traffic in the city became crowded again, but the road leading to the hospital was unusually smooth. Outside the operating room, not only was Mr. Orphe there, but also the director of the Scientific Research Institute and a group of anxious researchers. It didn't take long for Dr. Frankie's other old friend, Matthew, the curator of the Science and Technology Museum, to rush over after hearing the news. Curator Matthew was much closer to Dr. Frankie than he was to the director of the Scientific Research Institute. Matthew was Frankie's best friend. He came to Mr. Orphe, hugged him silently, and patted Mr. Orphe on the shoulder hard, giving the elder the comfort he could. I didn't expect this to happen. Matthew sighed in front of Mr. Orphe. That day, it wasn't long before he came to visit me with little Louis. I also promised him to discuss it with Mr. Billy again. How can he fall down now? I haven't convinced Billy yet. Why can't he fall down now? Mr. Orphe didn't speak. His mind was full of Dr. Frankie's smile after he fell down. His mood was calmer than anyone else's. Looking at the corridor full of people, Mr. Orphe walked silently to the corner and lit a cigarette. The cigarette was taken from someone else. In fact, Mr. Orphe had quit smoking for a long time. He understood that it was only because of his naive request that Dr. Frankie embarked on this never-ending path. However, the doctor continued to move forward. Perhaps, at first, he was only doing it because of a child's joke, but as more and more like-minded researchers appeared, perhaps the persistence in his heart was no longer just for a promise to his child. Later on, he even carried the lives of the entire team on his shoulders. Mr. Orphe suddenly remembered a saying he had heard somewhere. No change in human history is an idol. It is accompanied by tears and pain. How foolish, Mr. Orphe muttered. He was talking about himself, Dr. Frankie, and the people who were struggling at the forefront of the society. Sir, it was unknown when Barbara had arrived at the hospital, but she had brought Louis with her. She looked at Mr. Orphe fearfully and mustered her courage to say, I think I should have brought Louis with me. Mr. Orphe glanced at his son. The child probably didn't know what had happened. He just looked at the surrounding environment and revealed an unprecedented panic. Mr. Orphe reached out to comfort Louis's head. The child suddenly threw himself at Mr. Orphe and grasped Mr. Orphe's clothes tightly. After a long wait, the lights in the operating room suddenly dimmed. As the door of the operating room opened, the neurologist and the attending doctor of this consultation slowly walked out. The attending doctor took off his mask and shook his head at Mr. Orphe, who was the family member. His face was full of sadness. At this moment, even those who had been mentally prepared still thought it was a joke after hearing the verdict. The director and the curator, Matthew, both raised their heads. Of course, they didn't feel relieved, but they suddenly felt that something was missing in their lives. Barbara covered her mouth at once and couldn't stop her tears from falling. She had worked for this family for several years and naturally had a much deeper relationship with them than others. Lewis lowered his head on Mr. Orphe's body and didn't want to raise it. However, Mr. Orphe suddenly patted Lewis on the shoulder. "Son, aren't you going to say goodbye to your grandfather?" Little Lewis raised his head and looked at Mr. Orphe, who had a smile on his face. He suddenly felt that this was the ugliest smile he had ever seen from his father. He didn't know how to describe it. He felt that this smile was like a piece of white paper with nothing on it. The hospital soon announced the time of death. The patient passed away. Except for the patient's family members, no one else had anything to do with it. Some researchers began to depart under the director's arrangement. The director stayed until late at night and finally left with the curator of the Science Museum, Matthew. The two of them agreed to find a quiet place to sit for a while. They went for a drink. They said that they hadn't drunk with Frankie for a long time. They said that they would go to Frankie's favorite bar and that it must still be open. They said that they would drink enough for 3 people tonight and that Frankie would leave them like this. They talked and talked. A white bed covered by a white sheet. The body covered by the sheet didn't move at all. In the room where the doctor's body was placed, Mr. Orphe stood silently. At this time, little Lewis leaned on Mr. Orphe and sobbed from time to time. Maybe this is just a dream, an illusion. Maybe the body under the sheet will suddenly breathe in the next second. Mr. Orphe thought so. No one came to disturb Mr. Orphe and little Lewis saying goodbye to Dr. Frankie. After a long time, little Lewis fell asleep because he was too tired. After all, he was just a child. "Sir, I'm sorry for your loss." Barbara took little Lewis from Mr. Orphe's hand. Mr. Orphe heaved a long sigh and instructed the secretary waiting outside, "Send Barbara and Lewis back. I want to stay here for a while longer." At this time, the secretary didn't forcibly stop him but nodded. "Sir, I'll come back to pick you up after sending Miss Barbara and Lewis off." Mr. Orphe nodded and waved his hand to let them leave. He sat alone outside the door of the morgue and rubbed his cheeks. It was very quiet around. There wasn't even a pedestrian in the corridor. It was a completely quiet world. It should be the secretary who arranged to block the corridor to prevent unauthorized people from intruding. Although it was a bit of an abuse of power, Mr. Orphe wasn't angry at this time, nor did he think it was good. He just didn't want to think too much about it. Behind the door was the world of death, and in this world, Dr. Frankie might be walking away. Mr. Orphe leaned his head against the wall and looked at the light on the ceiling of the corridor without focus. I smell death." Suddenly, a deep man's voice sounded in the corridor, accompanied by the rhythmic sound of heels hitting the floor. Because of the silence, the voice was very clear and immediately pulled Mr. Orphe back to reality from his dazed state of mind. Mr. Orphe saw a strange guy with a carnival mask on his face and a strange costume, which looked like the white robe worn by bishops during important ceremonies. This guy wearing a carnival mask slowly walked in front of Mr. Orphe. With his hands behind his back, he looked a little mysterious. This made Mr. Orphe frown subconsciously. "Who are you?" As soon as he said this, Mr. Orphe's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered something that his secretary had mentioned to him, the video of Mr. Besson being shot. "I smell death." The voice behind the carnival mask became deeper and deeper, "But I can drive away death. Stop pretending to be mysterious." Mr. Orphe stared at the guy in front of him and instantly picked up the phone. But before the call was connected, Mr. Orphe's phone was quickly taken away, or rather, taken away from his hand. The person who did it wasn't the guy in the carnival mask in front of him, but another man who had walked up to him at some point. This man was wearing a grayish-black robe with a hood, like a wizard from a fairy tale. After taking away Mr. Orphe's phone, this guy quickly turned it off. "What do you want to do?" Mr. Orphe suddenly stood up. At this time, more and more guys in grayish-black robes appeared in front of Mr. Orphe. One of them put his hands on Mr. Orphe's shoulders and forced him to sit down. Come, come." In an instant, Mr. Orphe had these guys in strange costumes cover his mouth, even struggled a little. The man in the carnival mask slowly reached out his hand and pressed it on Mr. Orphe's forehead, saying indifferently, Foolish sinner, I forgive you. A faint white light spread from his palm and imprinted on Mr. Orphe's forehead. With the appearance of this faint light, the wizards around began to murmur. They were in awe and praises. Mr. Orphe felt terrible at this moment, because he had seen too many fanatical and irrational religious people. These guys were obviously believers of some religious organization. But this was not the only thing that made Mr. Orphe feel terrible. He felt very good at this moment, unprecedentedly spirited. The melancholy in his heart seemed to have been dispelled in an instant, and he even became spirited as if he had just attended a ball. He was in a good mood, but this was obviously abnormal. I said, I can drive away death. At the same time, I can also take away sorrow. As he said this, the man in the carnival mask turned around and walked towards the door of the morgue. The two wizards beside him opened the door for him. Mr. Orphe only heard this mysterious guy say slowly, I know you have a lot of doubts, but it doesn't matter. I will use a miracle to eliminate all the doubts in your heart and let you see the true light of the extraordinary and understand how great the miracle of life is. What do you want to do? Mr. Orphe suddenly became anxious. How did these people get in without making a sound? Mr. Orphe's body was lifted up by the wizards and sent into the morgue. All of the wizards entered at the same time. The adepts surrounded Dr. Frankie's bed in circles. The mysterious carnival masked man stood at the head of the bed, and Mr. Orphe was still being restrained by the adepts. Glancing at Mr. Orphe's shocked expression, the man in the carnival mask seemed very satisfied. He nodded and lifted the sheet on Dr. Frankie's head, making the doctor's pale face more visible. You are blaspheming the dead. You are breaking the law. Mr. Orphe struggled wildly, but the person who restrained him was abnormally strong. The man in the carnival mask. Buggy glanced at Mr. Orphe again. He didn't say anything, but he quietly lowered his head and looked at his palm. A piece of paper fell from his sleeve into Buggy's hand. He glanced at it, cleared his throat, and spoke in a low voice. Ah, what a beautiful and noble soul, but your life is so fragile. Buggy fell silent for a moment at this point. He then glanced at the paper in his hand again and continued. Lost sheep, I will lead you to a new world, grant you a new life, and give you precious time. Mr. Orphe listened to this mysterious person speak these strange words, but for some reason, he fell silent. What made Mr. Orphe incredulous was that at this moment, there was a vague and absurd expectation in his heart. Frankie, feel the glory of my God, and then return to this world as my God's servant. All of a sudden, Bucky let out a loud cry and raised his hands high. Then, he suddenly shook his hands and pressed them on Dr. Frankie's chest. In an instant, the white light in the morgue expanded. At this moment, the people dressed as wizards all knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Buggy. No one restrained Mr. Orphe anymore. They were all shocked by this scene. Mr. Orphe's expression was both frightened and pale. He slowly walked to the bed and looked at Dr. Frankie's face. He suddenly opened his mouth, but Dr. Frankie's eyelids suddenly twitched. Then, the doctor's fingers also moved a little. Mr. Orphe walked to the other side of the bed in disbelief. He looked at the mysterious man in the carnival mask, and then at Dr. Frankie, whose face gradually turned red. Finally, when Dr. Frankie suddenly opened his eyes, Mr. Orphe lost his mind. Orphe, where is this?